Hey everybody, happy Monday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Monday, January 10th, and we have an amazing lineup on today's show. We are going to get things kicked off with a conversation between Alan and Girish Jashnani, who is the CEO of a company called Flowsome. Flowsome is a DevSecOps release management platform company. They are currently focused on the Salesforce ecosystem, but maybe there's some other things coming down the pike. They are just doing a winter release 21, which update to the technology. It's going to be focusing on performance, efficiency, and security. So Flowsome is a company that we haven't taken a look at in the past, but it's a great introduction conversation about both the company and the technology. So totally worth checking out, especially if you're working in Salesforce environments. After that, Alan has a conversation. It's actually one that he did the recent KubeCon Cloud Native Con event happening in Los Angeles last fall. I believe it was maybe it was in September, October, November. I can't remember. It's all the months kind of blur together after a while. But this is a conversation that Alan has with Buddy Brewer, who is the General Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, and Mark Robinson, who was the Senior Vice President for Engineering and Product General Manager over at New Relic. And they talk about the maturity of observability practices and the launch of an instant observability initiative to simplify application instrumentation. This is a great technology, actually. It's really, we've been talking a lot about observability over the last year or so, and its growing importance in the DevOps ecosystem and really in the IT space in general. So what New Relic's offering to that space is really kind of fascinating. So Alan and Buddy and Mark kind of parse that out. It's a great conversation. After that, we have the Haunted Hacker podcast. This is part one of a three-part conversation that host Mike Jones has with John Lehman, who is a Senior Director of Veterans Services at Intellectual Point. He is a veteran and an all-around nice guy, Mike says, and it is they had a great conversation about everything ranging from politics and science, artificial intelligence to the federal government and what it's like being a veteran kind of transitioning to a civilian. So certainly cybersecurity is a very large part of the conversation, but they kind of go off the grid a little bit and talk about so many other very, very important things, especially to veterans. And certainly something that organizations that are working with veterans or maybe have plans to work with veterans, some of the things they want to keep in mind as well. Great conversation. After that, we have our Something Old segment. This is from the recent Innotech Oklahoma City conference that I was at, actually. I did a live stream from that and had a great time doing it. But this is a presentation that was David Smith, who is CTO over at Economic Transformation Technologies, or ETT. And he talked about some of the major trends that are going to impact businesses for the next few years. So we're talking about everything from 5G to blockchain to artificial intelligence and so much more. So David kind of goes through some of those trends and offers up some suggestions and options for surviving the impact of a lot of these trends. There is not one of these trends that's not going to impact your business in some way. So it's best to be prepared, and David offers up some tips for doing so. This is a great conversation, a great presentation. After that, I'm back with the news headlines. And then I have an outstanding conversation with two very, very smart ladies. One is Mary Galloway, who is the CEO of the Women's Society of Cyber Jitsu, which I tripped over all the time when I was doing the interview, and Megan Saul, who's the VP of Research and Marketing over at InfoSec. InfoSec Institute, they recently put together a new kind of scholarship program. It's part of its InfoSec Gives program that it has both internally and externally. This partnership with Women's Society of Cyber Jitsu, or WSC, It enables members of Women's Society of Cyber Jiu-Jitsu who receive these scholarships access to all kinds of information and training, and it is something for life. So we talk about the InfoSec Gives partnership with WSC, and we talk about its potential impact on increasing the ranks of women in the cybersecurity space. We also talk about women in cybersecurity in general. So it's a great conversation. I really, really enjoyed speaking with Mary and with Megan about this very, very important topic. After that, I do the webinars. I've got the webinars preview for you. And then Mitch is here with his Analyst Corner, and he is joined by his Techstrong research cohorts, Judith Hurwitz and Dan Kirsch. And they actually discuss some of the sustained trends that are happening of solidifying software as a key business strategy. Also normalizing everything digital, the acceptance of low code and no code as a tool for IT and business units, the growing prevalence of DevOps, and the growth of observability across microservices and security. Plus, you've got to have that focus on the software supply chain as well. So they're talking about some of these as trends that have begun in 2020, 2021, into 2022 and beyond. So it's a great kind of forward-looking conversation that they have, and definitely a lot of food for thought for organizations. After that, we have the View with Vizard, and that rounds out today's Techstrong TV broadcast. In this conversation, Mike Vizard is speaking with Craig McLucky, who's got the best last name ever, I have to say. But he's the chairman of the Cloud Foundry Foundation. And they talk about how the convergence of Kubernetes and platform as a service environments are going to drive application development in the days forward. So it's a great conversation. All right, as I said, that is today's lineup. We got chock full of goodness today for you, folks. We're going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages. All right, welcome back. We are going to get things kicked off now with our first interview. This is between Alan and Girish Jashnani, who is the CEO of Flowsome. Flowsome plays in the DevSecOps release management space. They focus on the Salesforce environments, but they have a winter release that's got so many great new tools and applications and just goodness for organizations, really focused on performance, efficiency, and security. So this is a great introduction to the company and the technology. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. I've got a new company, or at least that's a new company for our audience here to introduce you to. First, let me introduce you to Girish Jashnani. Girish is the co-founder CEO of a company called Flowsome. Girish, I hope I got all that right.
Yes, you did.
Great. Welcome to Techstrong TV, Girish.
Thanks, Alan. Very excited to be here.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you on. Let's start with this. Flowsome is, as I mentioned, a new company to our audience, to us here on Techstrong TV. So I guess we need to start with, what's Flowsome about? Tell us.
Yeah. Once again, thank you, Alan, for having me here. So Flowsome started as a DevOps company. I was an employee of Salesforce, and one of the gaps that I saw within Salesforce was having a DevOps solution which is very specific to the Salesforce platform. So, as we know, DevOps exists in all shapes and sizes. You have DevOps for infrastructure management, to maintain containers, Dockers, Kubernetes. That's one angle of it. You have DevOps for traditional applications like for Java platform, C platform, the traditional CI/CD applications. But what we saw was Salesforce is a low-code platform. And so it requires a different kind of thinking from a DevOps perspective. So Flowsome started as a DevOps solution, but then we have evolved into a much more, a company which creates a whole platform around for the Salesforce platform. So today we have a solution for security management. So again, if you look at, there are source solutions for security, orchestration, access, and management of applications. So we have a solution for that. We have a solution for Salesforce data backup and recovery. And so we have evolved into many other things. And we have done all this based on customer feedback. So we started as a DevOps company, but we have evolved into a lot more beyond DevOps.
Well, being a quote unquote DevOps company was never, I think, meant to be the end all be all. It's how do you use DevOps to do something, to do many things. And in your case, a lot of that around Salesforce. It's interesting, Girish, as I sit here, right? I've been doing DevOps.com now for 8 years more. And I've seen, again, this notion of a quote-unquote DevOps company. We saw companies that were database DevOps companies, DevOps for the database. We saw companies that were DevOps for this and DevOps for that. This subcategory, if you will, of DevOps for Salesforce, of course, Copado is probably one of the big examples of that unicorn status, raised a ton of money. And they really kind of pioneered a lot of this, DevOps for Salesforce. But really, DevOps lends itself to a lot of what we do in modern IT and software development and operations today. There are unique challenges. There are unique missions, if you will, goals. When you're on that Salesforce platform, that lend themselves to, how do we adopt DevOps ways for it? But I also remember when we talked about, DevOps for startups versus DevOps for large enterprises, as if there was different things. But there's not. There's only DevOps, right? There's only one DevOps. How we apply it, I think, may vary, but it's still just DevOps. You know what? Before we go further into Flowsome, though, what about a little bit of your background?
So my background is I'm primarily a software engineer, and I worked at Oracle. I did almost all kinds of role at Oracle. That was where my largest career span was, right from running development teams to doing product management to doing sales, consulting. I did all of it at Oracle, and then I had a brief stint at Salesforce after that, before I started Flowsome.
Excellent. And do you have any other founders at Flowsome who helped you start this?
It was just me, actually, who started this.
Excellent. Good for you. Good for you. So let's talk now a little bit about the journey you've been on with Flowsome. I've been an entrepreneur for 25, 30 years. I've met many other entrepreneurs and founders. Every founder feels that in some way what they're doing is going to make the world better. It's not necessarily, there are degrees. We're not saying we're curing cancer or COVID or anything like that. But what you're doing is going to make someone's life easier. It's going to make us go faster, do something more securely. What was that drive for you with Flowsome that you said, the world needs this?
The drive was, if you look at my experience, I came from Oracle, and Oracle was, Oracle had a huge breadth and depth of applications. You could take any industry, any application, and Oracle almost had a solution for it. From supply chain to transportation to EHR, Oracle had a solution for everything. But almost all the solutions, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of work to get it going. And then I was in the sales team at Oracle, and I saw that Oracle was consistently losing deals to Salesforce in the CRM space. So that intrigued me. Why is Oracle losing so much deals, and why is it that people are going so much towards Salesforce. This was a long time back. This was about, I would say about 8-10 years back. And I saw a lot of C-level people leave because the sales lead would always stick their neck out and they would say, I only want the Salesforce platform. Otherwise, they would leave the sales group. So the board level decision was always to go with Salesforce instead of choosing Oracle applications, even though the entire company had standardized on Oracle applications. So that intrigued me, and that is why I switched to Salesforce. And when I moved to Salesforce, I saw the platform just worked. It was a low-code platform. It was easy to build applications on. Actually, during my interview process, they asked us to build an application within 1 week. And I was actually concerned, how can someone build an application on the Salesforce platform within 1 week? But I called one of my friends at Salesforce and they said, just try it. You will be able to do it. And I spoke to the friend in the morning. By evening, I had an application built on the Salesforce platform. And for me, that was the biggest shift. To build an application on the low-code platform, so easy, so fast, so complete, that would take a lot of time on other platforms. So that created a big shift in me. But when I switched to Salesforce, I saw other gaps, like in terms of change management, in terms of risk management, in terms of containing the security posture. I saw a lot of gaps. And that is when I recommended, I was at Salesforce for 3 years. I recommended to the product management team to build a DevOps solution, which is inconsistent with the technology, with the culture of the Salesforce platform. So because Salesforce is a low-code platform, most of the people who are working on the platform, they're not computer science engineers. They are business analysts, they are citizen developers. They want to make changes quickly and they want to deploy changes quickly. So if we tell them to use a traditional CI/CD stack to make changes, we lose them. And what we saw with the Salesforce platform was, it's easy to build applications, but then it's hard to migrate applications and deploy applications and promote applications. So the governance piece was hard, change management was hard. That is where I saw that what we need is a low-code DevOps platform, which is inconsistent with the culture of the Salesforce platform, which is easy to use. They should not have to learn anything new. It should be just like the Salesforce platform provides quick time to value, a DevOps platform should also provide quick time to value. Also, I was in sales and I used to help companies evaluate the Salesforce platform. So I used to work with defense organizations and financial services organizations. And some of the organizations, they would take 6 months to evaluate the Salesforce platform from a security point of view, from a privacy point of view, how the data is stored, who has access to the data, and typical how enterprises choose platforms. Because this is a big decision for them to switch to the Salesforce platform. A lot of banks, they were moving for the first time from the cloud, from the on-premise platform to the first time they were moving to a cloud platform. So it's a very big decision for them. They were calling in all kinds of people to evaluate the Salesforce platform from all kinds of different directions. And so I thought that if we build the solution in a different way, and if we leave the Salesforce platform, it's going to be harder for customers to choose the DevOps solution. So even the DevOps solution that we have built is 100% native on the Salesforce platform. Not a byte of the code of our solution, the data that's generated by our application, leaves the Salesforce platform. It's 100% on the Salesforce platform. So what customers get is, we never have access to customers' data. We cannot see how they are using our application. They can modify the application in the once. So they get all the benefits of the Salesforce platform. So our applications are easy to customize and extend. They get all the data residency, all the data privacy, data security that comes with the Salesforce platform. And that was a core requirement for most of the customers. So we said, if they're choosing 6 months in evaluating the Salesforce platform from all these different points of view, they should not take 6 months in evaluating a DevOps solution. So we need to make it in such a way so that it's easy for them to make a decision. And that is why we built the platform in that way, so that it's easy for them to make a decision. So which is why all the solutions are 100% native, built 100% on the Salesforce platform, and it's kept consistent with the culture and the technology of the Salesforce platform. And what we have done, the third thing I would say that we have done is we have understood the Salesforce platform very intimately. So it's we built the solution from ground up. We did not say let's use other open source technology and let's see how we can retrofit other open source technology into the Salesforce platform. We looked at it, from a starter approach, with a Zen approach, and then we said, let's look at the Salesforce platform and let's find the easiest way, quickest way so that it's easier for customers to build applications and to change applications. And so what we have done is we have done a lot of optimizations as part of a DevOps platform. So let's say if the developers are shipping wrong code, what our application does is it'll automatically fix the code that the developers have created. Rather than having the developers to change the code and fix the code on a manual basis, we will tell the developers, these are the issues we are finding in your code. And with one click of a button, they can resolve hundreds and hundreds of issues, which will take them hours and days to resolve all these issues. So because of that, they get a lot of developer productivity that comes because we have built the solution from the ground up for the Salesforce platform. Whereas if you see other applications, and including some of the other solutions that you named, they don't do that. So, the whole purpose of DevOps is to improve efficiency, and that is inherently built at each and every place in our application.
Got it. You know what? And I see the passion for your Girish, and that's important. When you're a founder of a company that you're passionate about it. So, give us. I think we've got the background on Flowsome, what it does, why you started it, and everything. Bring us up to date. Where is the company? Product is GA, raised money. Where are you?
Yeah. So from a company point of view, we have hundreds and hundreds of customers, in all shapes, all sizes, in all verticals. So we do really well in federal space. So we have Navy, Air Force, a whole bunch of federal customers using it, whole bunch of customers in financial services, healthcare. So we are in all verticals. So DevOps is a flagship product of the company. But what we are seeing is customers are also looking at other solutions that we are building. So they are starting to use our backup and recovery solution that we have launched. And we are talking to customers about a security management solution that we are also about to release. So we are very excited about that. In terms of funding, we have chosen to remain independent. So that we can listen to the customers rather than listen to investors. We want to do the right thing for the customers rather than, get a bunch of money from investors, focus on improving sales velocity, and just treat customer as a number. So we treat customers really well. We listen to them, and we drive the product direction based on a lot of their feedback. So we get offered from investors a lot of funding from all kinds of investors, right from investors on the Wall Street to typical, all the top investors of Silicon Valley. But at this point, we have chosen to remain independent.
Excellent. And worldwide kind of customer base, or is it primarily North America, US?
We have customers all over. So we have customers in Australia, Japan, Middle East, Europe, South America, North America, all over the place.
Fantastic. You know what we didn't tell people? To get more information or check it out, what's the website?
Yeah, so the website is flowsum.com. FLO.
Yeah, go ahead.
FLOSUM. Our marketing team right now is working on rebuilding the website. So I don't know when they will see this interview, but in a few weeks, we are going to publish a new website with a different content and different kind of exciting stuff.
Well, this will be up pretty quickly, so it'll probably be the old website, but that's okay. As long as they know where to go, they can always keep going back, right?
Yeah.
Girish, what a great success story. And, you know, I love interviewing entrepreneurs. I love interviewing founders. And you know, I think what you've laid out about why Flowsum, why you do it, what you do is a great example of it. I want to thank you for being our guest here on Techstrong TV today. This was great. Continued success. Come back and keep us posted.
Yeah. Thank you, Alan. Great to talk to you.
Great to speak to you. That's Flowsum at flowsum.com. Check it out. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV, and we'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, we are back. Next up, we have a conversation that Alan did at the recent KubeCon Cloud Native Con event in Los Angeles. I think it was in October. And it's a conversation that he had with Buddy Brewer, who was the GVP for Strategic Partnerships, and Mark Robinson, who is the SVP of Engineering and Product GM over at New Relic. And they talk about observability, specifically the maturity of observability practices and the launch of an instant observability initiative to simplify application instrumentation. This is very, very much a popular topic in the DevOps space. Observability is really growing in importance for developers and IT operations folks alike. So this is a great technology, and it's a great conversation. Let's get to it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
All right, back here live in LA for KubeCon. It's great to be back here. Well, we haven't been in LA in a while, but it's just great to be at an event live, and no matter where it is. But thanks for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed our coverage of today's KubeCon event. We're probably giving you a dozen or more interviews with some of the leaders here. My next one is a little different. I actually have two guests here, so there's three of us. Our two guests are from New Relic. Now I'm going to give Buddy and Mark a chance to introduce themselves. Buddy, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm Buddy. I lead product partnerships for New Relic.
Well, we should give him your last name too, Buddy.
Last name is Brewer, Buddy Brewer.
Buddy Brewer
on Twitter.
And you
find me
lead
on LinkedIn.
product?
I lead product partnerships. I'm the GVP of product partnerships at New Relic.
Excellent. Thanks, man. And to the right of Buddy here is Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark Robinson, and I lead the experience platform at New Relic, and that's the NR1 website and this New Relic IO that we're going to be talking about, and a few other tidbits. So excited to talk more about it.
Mark wins the gold star. You did a nice job with that, buddy. Just saying. Anyway. Guys, welcome and thanks for being here on Techstrong TV with us. So first of all, it's great to see you in person. Buddy, you and I have done Techstrong TVs remotely.
Yeah.
And it's different. You're sitting at a desk, we got the virtual background, and you know, it's not live. Here we are, you know, in person, in the flesh, live. And it's definitely different, but it's welcome. I think there's something about the human condition that needs sort of interaction like that we kind of, like when all this first went down and we were on Zoom, we were like, yeah, it is fine. Who needs that in-person stuff, right? We'll do it on Zoom. And that was okay for, a year. But then it got old, right? Yeah, you realize you want it. So guys, it's CD, or it's CNCF, Cloud Native Con, KubeCon. What's New Relic doing here?
Yeah, we're launching New Relic Instant Observability, which is really about taking all of the time and the friction out of getting started with observability. One of the things that is just fascinating, one of the things that was talked about in the keynotes this morning were the magnitude and the scope of the platform and all of the different pieces and how it's grown from year over year, how many people are involved, how many organizations are involved, and that's all terrific. But there's a lot of complexity that comes along with that. And one of the problems that we see at New Relic is that our customers and users, when it comes to observability, have a really hard time, because they're shipping software so fast, instrumenting fast enough to keep up with the pace of software development. And so what Instant Observability is designed to do is to make it really, really easy for people to get started within 5 minutes, to start data flowing in that gives them some information about what's happening in their systems, wrap that data in an opinionated point of view with visualizations that are pre-built, that have best practices baked in, and then in a lot of cases with proactive notifications that come along as well. So taking all that manual toil and effort out of the process of setting up observability.
Well said.
Mark was impressed with that one, buddy.
Yeah. Nailed it. No, actually, yeah, and we want to extend that because we're turning that into a growing community where we want to allow others to also contribute in, which is the open source aspect of this.
Sure.
And bring everyone along to where they're going to add new areas to observe, new dashboards to really get value that we wouldn't have thought of. So it's going to be a great community win-win.
At some level, people hear instant observability, and it's almost like an oxymoron, right? Because I think one of the issues we've seen with observability is it's almost by definition not so instant, right? It could be hard. You have all these sources. You have massive. To do it well, right? You have a ton of data you got to sift through and analyze. And then, it's gathering that data, analyzing that data, putting it into a front end that people can then, use in a usable format. So when we say, just add water, instant observability, it's like, well, how are we doing all that, right? And you can say, well, we're doing it with open source so people can add their stuff in, and that's, viable. Yeah. But how are we doing that, guys? Talk to me here. Explain it.
Yeah, when a while ago we commissioned actually a study where we asked 1,300 developers a lot of questions. And one of the questions we asked them was, how mature do you think your observability practice is? And only 26% said that they felt like it was pretty mature. The other 3/4 felt like it was not a mature observability practice. And so then, of course, we asked the question, why? And it's not because they can't figure out how to do all of this stuff. They know how to do all this stuff. They just don't have time, right? It's too complicated. It takes too long to figure it out. And so in a lot of cases they don't, or they focus it just on the pieces that are absolutely critical. But the problem, as we've discussed before, and one of the hallmarks of observability versus monitoring is that you don't know where those pieces are that you need to target your instrumentation at anymore. Because where the problem is going to happen tomorrow is probably going to be in a new place. And so if you don't instrument everything, then you're opening yourself up to risk. And at New Relic, we've been, for 13 years, adding these components and more components and more components, from the front end to the service layer to the instrumentation and now network monitoring and all this different stuff. And one of the things that we've learned in working with those customers is that one of the best ways for us to help, yes, of course, we're always layering in more instrumentation, but holistically, if we can pull the visualizations, the data, the instrumentation itself, and the alerts with some best practices into a single installable unit that's easy to find, the time savings there makes all the difference. The difference between actually instrumenting something or not, which makes the difference between actually being able to solve a problem quickly or not when something happens in production.
Absolutely.
I think he nailed that one, Mark. Huh?
I think he's on a roll.
2 gold stars for Buddy,
that's
man.
right.
Good stuff. What do you think?
Oh no, I agree, and I was going to say that one of the other things that gets missed in all of this, it's kind of what Buddy alluded to. You tend to naturally focus on the part you're really interested in at that moment. But one of the great values of New Relic is that you have this massive collection of data that works so well together. So it's not just that you have APM and infra and networking and logs. It's like the meaning of being able to pivot on those different aspects and context gives you so much more value. But heck, that's a lot of work to set up.
Yeah, it
so
is.
we're trying to make sure that value is much closer, right at your fingertips.
Yeah.
And that's really a major aspect of this focus on simplification.
Another big component of it that's unique that we're launching this week is a shift. Part of this complexity also, frankly, is it's gotten to the point where we can't build all of this stuff on our own. No one can.
Yeah.
And in fact, this was one of the things that also was a feature that I really sort of resonated with me in the keynotes this morning, was this discussion that for all of the technologies that are out here today, the open source and all the other vendors that are in the expo area that we're in today, those technologies are important, but equally important is the community of people that make it all go. Because everything that's out here today, it's still not enough. There's still a lot of work to do in order to deliver and manage and yes, of course, observe all of the software. And so one of the things that we built into New Relic IO was a way for us to open the system up so that it's not just dependent on what our own engineers can build. So getting something into this ecosystem, we've got 400 and some odd integrations that are in there today, but if you want to add one, what you do is you go into the GitHub repository that's publicly facing. You can actually clone that to your local system. You can add anything that you think needs to belong in that ecosystem, whether you're a user who's trying to solve a problem, let's say you're a consultant or you work in professional services or something and you want to bake some best practices in, or you're a partner of ours. All you have to do is take that, clone it, you can build the quick start, is what we call it, and then submit a pull request, right? So the way that software companies used to always operate was in order to change something in a vendor's platform, you had to put a feature request in, it had to get prioritized on the roadmap, they had to build something, right? And of course we still do all of that, and we still commit a lot of resources to building all of this instrumentation with all the stuff that goes around it. But what we've done that I think is really important is open it up for anybody to get involved as well. You can submit modifications or improvements to the ones that already exist, or contribute brand new ones through just it's a GitOps workflow through pull requests.
Love it.
And that's where a lot of our partners are getting very excited, because it doesn't just stop there. They can add their own visualizations. You can go in and do a simple SDK coding exercise and add that in as well. So you can get your own. Kintic is doing that.
We just had Avi Friedman on from Kintic. Actually mentioned it.
Yeah. Great individual, wonderful company. And they've actually done that as well. So they've added a lot of great network observability right into New Relic by extending the platform that we have, and now we have a quick start to go along with that.
One of the cool things about that Kintic quick start is, I mentioned dashboards and instrumentation and alerts. In their case, they integrated so deeply into our platform that you can't tell in a lot of cases which data is being provided by the partner and which data is being provided by New Relic.
That's when it's working well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's important stuff. And I think, Buddy, I think you, no kidding around, you nailed it when you talked a little bit about the need for community, right? People can't see the floor from here because we're facing this way. The floor is very socially distanced. It's a huge expo floor. But I'm going to guess there are 60, 80, something like that, vendor booths out there. And all of them are great individual solutions in their own way.
Yeah.
But the power is in them working together. The power of, and why KubeCon and Cloud Native Con is so popular, and the Linux Foundation is so popular, because it gives companies who would otherwise maybe be competitors, it gives companies, users, individuals, developers, all a chance to play on the same playing field. What you do with it and how well you commercialize things, that's up to you, right? But it's the community, stupid, right? It's about that community that empowers 1 + 1 = 3 instead of 2. And I think, it sounds to me like this new New Relic IO, is that right?
Yep.
It's really harnessing that energy to do that.
Yeah, and we're just getting started, and to your point, the whole industry and the community is just getting started. I mean, look at OpenTelemetry itself, right? So I think recently the tracing component of OpenTelemetry has reached 1.0 status. You've got logs and metrics and beta. There's a lot more room for growth there. Imagine a future where all of this is fully GA, and not only that, but adopted by everyone you see around here. And then someone who's just trying to build and operate software needs 2 different tools to talk to each other. How easy that's going to be when we can just communicate to each other with OpenTelemetry. So we support OTLP today. We use it where we can. There's a lot more. It's just really the beginnings for OpenTelemetry. But to your point, those standards, until recently they didn't exist, and they're actually still in the process of making their way out. I think they're going to unlock a lot of interoperability between tools, which people who are writing software, given the architectures these days and how distributed they are just desperately need.
Yeah, it's such a quickly growing surface area. All the different technologies coming out, and if we don't work together as a community, it's going to just nobody's going to be able to stay on top of it.
No, well, it goes back to what I think, coming full circle. It grows out of the big data world, right? Yeah. And it's a big, not problem, but a big idea to get your head around and wrap your arms around. And it does. It takes a village, it takes a community. And I think that's the lesson here. Guys, thanks for coming on Techstrong TV and telling us all about this. Buddy, it's great to see you in person.
Yeah, great to see you too.
Hopefully we'll start doing more in-person events and less virtual stuff, and we can continue the conversation. You know what we didn't mention? People want to get more information. Where could they go?
Well, the easiest thing to do is just to go to newrelic.com. There's a giant button on there where you can sign up for our free account. So we have a free tier that's free forever. You get a user license that has access to everything that we provide. So it's the same set of functionality that our biggest enterprise customers have, and 100 gigabytes of ingest per month. So if you go to New Relic IO, or if you look up any of these quick starts and you want to try one of them out and you don't have a New Relic account, that's okay. You can use that free tier for as long as you want.
It'll work for you. Yeah. Great, man. Mark, buddy, thanks for joining us. Hey, we're live. We're live here at KubeCon. Folks at New Relic, about New Relic IO, check it out. We're going to take a break. We'll be back here in a minute. We got plenty more to cover today on day 1 of our KubeCon coverage.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we've got the Haunted Hacker Podcast. This is part 1 of a 3-part conversation that Mike Jones has with John Lehman, who is the Senior Director of Veteran Services over at Intellectual Point. John's a veteran, and he is obviously in the cybersecurity space, but he's also a really great guy, and they talk about politics and science and AI and federal government, what it's like being a veteran, transitioning to being a civilian. Mike Jones is actually also a veteran, and so they have a lot to talk about and a lot of insights beyond just cybersecurity, so definitely one worth checking out. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
Welcome to the Haunted Hacker Podcast. John, why don't you give us a number so I can number this podcast tonight?
Just any random number?
Let's do between 200 and 300. Sounds good.
Let's go with 265.
Wow, that's really close to the last one. The last one was 267. Cool, number 265. So let's start with some news. I'll be speaking at FinCon DX this upcoming Thursday live. It'll be remote, but it's a financial kind of consortium conference for Techstrong. I'll be talking about hackers' techniques and motivations throughout modern history, going after financial institutions and people's money in general. Other than that, I'll be speaking at ICE coming up pretty soon, speaking for all of ICE in the US sometime in January, I believe. And then I'll be on a good friend Jack Scott podcast later on this week, talking about hackers and hackers' motivations. So tonight we have John Lehman on. John's a friend of mine. And John, why don't you introduce yourself and give us a little of your background and kind of what you're doing now in your journey?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me on Haunted Hacker. My background is I'm retired military. The first stint that I spent in the military was active duty Army, and I was a flight medic. I got out of doing that, and then I joined the Air National Guard as a security forces specialist. And then I took a short stint off of that and became an Alaska State Trooper. And then from there, was kind of lost in the sauce, picked up jobs here and there. And now I am the Senior Director of Veteran Services at Intellectual Point. And one of the things that brought me to this point and juncture was working in private investigation and looking at fraud cases in particular, and then really getting into doing some war driving activities, which really sponsored my love for the cyber security aspect of it and just hacking in general. And I'm one of these guys that once I get involved in something, I have to know more. I have to be part of that culture, and I have to live it, breathe it, and, wear the uniform, so to speak, be part of that culture. So, as things kind of chugged along, I got hired into this position as Senior Director of Veteran Services. And what I do now is I assist veterans that need to gain a meaningful employment through the Vet Tech and the VRAP program, through just many different channels. One of the biggest things that we're looking at right now is blockchain, and how blockchain is playing into the security aspects of pretty much everything we're looking at as far as commerce is concerned. Anywhere from farming potatoes to dealing with cryptocurrencies. And many people don't even understand what the multiple applications of blockchain are. So getting into conversations with people, it's fun. Dealing with blockchain in particular. A couple of weeks ago, I listened to a podcast dealing with insurance, cyber insurance. And I was thinking about the applications of what blockchain would be for within cyber insurance. And I believe it was Chris is the one that stated that. Yeah, that was a great podcast. I sit there and I take notes. Anytime that somebody knows a lot more than me, I like to take notes, observe, just kind of be a fly on the wall, see what's going on. Right on. That's kind of a background of myself and where I'm at right now.
Cool. So yeah, coming out of the military is an interesting phase, especially when I came out of the military. So I went to the DAV and talked to them about what they could do for me. Also, I was using my GI Bill while I was in the military, just taking random ass courses just because it gave me an extra $1,000 a month. But they were all science courses and geology and oceanography and just science in general. So the DAV actually made a point. They said, look, if you qualify for a certain amount of disability, then we can help you get money to start your own business, which I thought was really cool. The only unfortunate thing was, with TS SCI clearance, if you go to the VA, my biggest fear was losing that security clearance because of, something that happened during the active duty time or whatever, because they were throwing diagnosis around like PTSD and stuff like that when I got out. And I didn't want to lose that clearance. So I kind of had to, luckily I had been doing the things that I'm doing now before I went in the military. So I kind of knew where I was going to go back to. Not quite the right side of it, but eventually made it to the right side of it. So, I mean, I talked to a lot of vets. I talked to a lot of guys who are cross rating into cyber warfare rates. I talked to a guy who actually took one of my courses in the military, the one that I helped form the CTN rate for the Navy. So it's really interesting to see people transition. But I think even more interesting is what we bring to cybersecurity, as far as knowing the chain of command, knowing war rooms, knowing fast-paced, high-intensity type situations. Looking at ransomware and so many attacks now, that's exactly what it is. It's like, detecting a weapon on a radar and a reaction. So I see a lot of the military guys actually fitting in well and actually blending in, just like everybody else, even though they don't have a background in that. They know what to do and theoretically how to form things and get things going in an emergency. So Alaska State Trooper, I mean, and I know most of the guys leave the military, like especially the guys that I was in with in intelligence, left and became cops. And I never understood that. Like, I know it's an easy transition. But what was your mindset going into law enforcement? Like, well, why did you pick law enforcement and not something completely off the grid?
Oh my gosh, here we go. You open up a can of worms here. So my initial thought process was to go into something that was very paramilitary-like, because when I got out of the Army, I was out literally 3 days, and I could not stand being out of uniform. I hated it. Yeah. I was like, I don't know how to act as a civilian. People are looking at me weird when I say yes, ma'am, no, sir. It's just, I didn't fit the paradigm. I still had the high and tight, still walked around very robotic, and I had a very militant mindset. So I was out 3 days, and then I turned right around, grabbed my DD-214, grabbed all my paperwork, went up to the Air National Guard base, and then processed as a security forces, Air Force cop, if you will. And I have a desire to do investigations and look at stuff prior. So, when I did, you're familiar with the website, cybernights.us. They have like a little personality test you can do. Yeah. And it comes up and, big surprise, I'm analytic, and I'm more inclined towards the forensics and analytics side of the house. I enjoy a lot of other things simply because I have a curious brain and I have that creative edge. If I can't make it, I want to brick it. And if I can't brick it, then let me try to figure something else to do with this piece of equipment. And, or, it doesn't matter if it's a shovel or if it's, a laptop, it's like, let me do something different with this tool to make a better pathway or a better job. But it was more or less curiosity that got me into doing the police work, is to answer your question. And also to kind of foster that esprit de corps and camaraderie that I so longed for out of the military and just never got. Everybody that's a veteran can probably agree with me or emote with me on a very deep level that that's one of the major things that, as a veteran, it brings a lot of sadness, because we crave to have leadership. We crave to have
Structure
and camaraderie within a group where if you know that you drop something and I'm behind you, I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to hand it back to him and say, hey, this is yours, Mike. And I think that that's one of the things that terribly saddens a lot of veterans, and that's where they lose their place in society. That's why we have such a high suicide rate within the veterans community, because once the veterans leave their community, technically they're roosted from the nest and they don't know where to go.
Right.
And I can honestly say I was there for years. And the one thing that is really interesting, and I know that I'm kind of going on a diatribe, but I want to share this, is I think it's extremely important. My 20s and 30s, I spent a lot of time studying martial arts, and Russian martial arts in particular. And I chased the tail of what I call the paper dragon, where I always wanted to have somebody give me certifications and, give me the blessing to say that I was the man and within this field.
Right.
And I see a lot of that kind of going on within the cybersecurity realm, where a lot of people are saying, I need certifications. I got to a certain point where it's like, now I'm looking for mentors more so than I am looking for people that can give me a certification. Certifications are great, because they'll get your foot in the door for a job. But in reality, do you really know what that certification entails? Or do you, I know that you understand where I'm going with this, and that there's probably a lot of people within your audience that will also agree. But before I decided to move on in life, I took everything, all of my martial arts certificates, everything, except for meaningful documents from the military. And I put them in a smoker that I bought for myself for Father's Day. And I burnt all that stuff in my backyard. My neighbors were like, what are you cooking? And I'm like, 20 years of paperwork.
Nice.
But I did that because I didn't want to have that paperwork define me as a human being. I didn't want that paperwork to define the parameters in which I could think about myself outside of the constraints that other people put upon me. Yeah. And, that was really a huge point for me psychologically, because I now don't have to focus on, somebody saying, yeah, you have to have this medal, you have to have this, you have to have, right, this certification, you have to have gone through this school. The reality is, can you do it? Are you good at it? And how can we improve?
Right.
And those things, it's like read a book, take a look. It's in a book, Reading Rainbow. You got to read. You got to surround yourself with positive people, and you constantly got to strive to be a better you. And the only way that you can do that is by doing that. Exactly.
Totally.
So,
I think in our environment, especially the highly politicized environment and very politically correct environment, it's hard to find those people that have what you want. And what I did early on, especially out of the military, was I latched on to the people that I knew were going to make a difference if they hadn't already. People like Chris Roberts. I learned so much more through basic osmosis from just being there when they're talking and just listening. I always tell people, if you want to learn how to do what we do less of this, moving the jaws, and open up your ears and just listen. Because there's so much that can be, discovered about the culture, the way that we learn, the new things that we're looking at just by listening to people around you. I really appreciate that about the cybersecurity industry. However, the things that I despise about the industry is just that, the certifications and the, the profile that people put on you from the outside, not knowing who you are, not knowing anything about you, but reading a post and assuming that you're this type of person, you're that type of person. And there's so much So everybody's trying to make this climb to the top, right? And everybody's doing it simultaneously. And there's a lot of people out there that would not hesitate to cut your throat to climb over the top of you to get to the next rung. And I tell people it's a great community to be in. The friends I've made are phenomenal, and the quality people that I decide to surround myself with are great. But there are those other people out there, and those other people are poisonous. And certifications, I mean, I bitch about certifications all the time because it's a snapshot in time. The test you take is over methods and techniques. Let's say it's hacking, right? Methods and techniques right now. But eventually, and very quickly, those techniques and situations are going to change. So you learned this small window in time, what this meant. Now, a year, maybe not even a year, maybe 6 months from now, it's going to change. And what we face is completely different. I think the principles are all the same, but I think the content and the way we qualify people based on how they take a test is bullshit. I, for one, I test well, but there's a lot of people out there that don't test well, that freak out, get nervous, their mind gets clouded, and now they're in proctored exams, right? So you're in this facility that they've got people watching you to make sure that you're not cheating or whatever, and that puts an extra level of pressure on you. And I don't think that we should gauge people based on the score that they make on a test. That, like I said, that test is a very, very small sample of that person. I've seen a lot of really qualified people, just their background and the way that they operate, totally qualified for positions, but not get them because they didn't have that one cert. And like the DoD is infamous for this, right? So I was going to go over to Kabul and be part of a group that was doing cybersecurity and cyber intelligence. But you needed a CEH of all things, and then an extra certification on top of that. And I asked him, I said, why the CEH? And I realized why. Because EC Council gave them a cut on that certification and I guess like a decrease of the amount of fee. So they had a partnership with the DoD. And I thought it was really shitty. And when you look at EC Council now, I sure hope the Department of Defense abandoned that certification because that company is pretty corrupt. I invited the CEO of the company onto the podcast to discuss, the way that they certify and the content and what their certification means, but I got no response. So hopefully that conversation will happen someday. But as far as law enforcement goes, I too had that same thought of, well, I don't want to completely disconnect from the military. I even looked at Blackwater when Blackwater was still around. I looked at other paramilitary organizations to do intel and stuff like that. But it was like, do I want less protection than I had before and do the same job? Or do I want to find something else? So I decided to do something else. But I think as time goes by and we get these ransomware groups and the millions and millions of dollars that they're stealing, I see room for paramilitary type groups in cybersecurity. If we can't shut you down and shut your network down remotely, let's drop a few people in. Israel, I think, had the very first situation of that where they got hacked and they just lit off a couple missiles and destroyed the building that they traced the attack to. Right. So I think when cybersecurity and cyber war goes kinetic and we start seeing infrastructure being attacked, I think we're going to see more room for those weaponized paramilitary groups and also the intelligence, cyber intelligence that goes with it. What are your thoughts on that?
I actually agree with you on this in regards to going kinetic. And I think that there's certain things as far as, and I know that you've touched on this in some of the prior podcasts, like the last 2 weeks. And this really got my brain flown in this direction. So I'm actually really glad that you asked the question. We need to stop being so willy-nilly with policy and look at exactly what that line is, and stop mincing words and stop dancing around. Because when it comes to critical infrastructure systems, particularly with water, electrical supply, things like this, where hospitals, and dealing with hospitals and triage in general. If you look at most hospitals in the United States, most of them do not have open fields next to them. Mm. They are encased in some metropolitan area where they don't have an area to be able to triage people if there are mass casualties due to water poisoning through, the attack of critical infrastructure systems. So there needs to be a definitive line that is drawn that says, if you do this, then you get this. There's no more beating around the bush. We all know about Natanz, and we know about how things went down with Iran. And, there's a lot of speculation and a lot of books and things like this dealing with the U.S. intelligence agencies and dealing with the Israeli intelligence agencies and how that played into the whole Natanz situation with Iran. And, that's kind of war by proxy. And, there's certain things that if you're going to do it overtly, do it overtly and say, yes, this was done to you. And this is the reason why it was done to you. And don't play around. But the age of being truthful and honest
are gone.
And being straightforward with your action and trying to give a genuine experience just as a person. If you try to give somebody a genuine experience as a person, just if you try to have a genuine interaction where you're having a conversation like we are right now, some people take grave offense to it, because if you don't completely agree with their mindset, then you're an enemy. Well, that's not the case, and I'm not saying that we have to make everybody an enemy, but there are certain case players that we know are taking state information, or they're taking information that is proprietary knowledge or intellectual
property.
Right. Intellectual property. And they're just abusing it. And the whole state of China can be looked at as a threat actor in that sense. And you can also look at some of the privatized state-funded organizations that are in Russia as well. You no longer have the Warriors Zakoniev. You don't have that type of gangster, gangbanger type of mentality, but those entities still do exist.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, we are back. Next up, we've got our Something Old segment. This is from the InnoTech Oklahoma City, or OKC conference that just happened. I think it was early December, maybe. I can't remember. And this is one of the presentations that happened at InnoTech. It is by David Smith, who is the CTO of ETT, which is Economic Transformation Technologies. He goes over some of the trends that are going to impact businesses in the years ahead, including 2022. So 2022 and beyond. We're talking about 5G. We're talking about blockchain. We're talking about AI. We're talking about so many other things. And so David offers some of those things that organizations need to be on the lookout for, and well as offer some suggestions and review options for surviving the impact of these business trends, or maybe even capitalizing on them. It is a great presentation with a lot of takeaways. So let's go ahead and get to it now.
Welcome everyone here today. I love coming to Oklahoma City to talk. It's so much fun, and you're new convention center is amazing. So thank you. I was just really surprised last night at the airport. There were no Ubers or Lyfts there at all. So the whole world of COVID has changed us a lot. I'm going to spend today a little bit of time with you talking about, at the high level, some of the future trends that will impact your business. Why me? I've spoken at most of the Intertechs around the country many times. I used to be an assistant dean at the University of Texas in Austin. I was an executive at the two consortia, MCC and Semitech, that recovered the computer industry and the semiconductor industry. Led the first national technology roadmap ever done in the United States. A company called Technology Futures did consulting work for over half the Fortune 100. Any of you James Bond movie fans? I designed the key organization inside this Central Intelligence Agency called InQtel. Ran the Futures program at National Security Agency, Innovation Steering Committee at DARPA and others like that. Started several companies. I'm with a company right now called ETT, where we buy companies, grow companies, combine companies to really solve some of the heartbeat problems of the country and the world. So that's a little bit of my background. I love this quote. If you think you're an organization that you can really not bother the future, you're going to be out of business. And this is a former CEO at Coca-Cola, and he was 100% right. As you looked at that and how it's going, how many of you can relate to this statement? How many of you have cable TV or satellite internet, 2 cell phones, premium TV, internet TV, satellite radio? God, I normally see more hands than that. So we're at an age now where technology has changed. We're at an age where digitalization really defines our life and what we're doing. Because if you think about all of the things on the slide right now, they are driven by digitalization and they're driven by connectivity. Now, how many of your blood pressure begins to go up if you're without internet for 2 hours, 1 hour, half an hour? And you see that everywhere today. And if you think about it, you're spending a lot of money for data. A lot of money for data, and that's really what you're doing and where you're headed from it. And so we're really in the age of data. And I'm sorry, I'm going to come off of this and come down to where you are. Data is doubling in the country every 2 years. And this is since the start of when we collected data. And it begins to double and it goes. And in 2022, about 1.7 megabytes of new information will be created every second for every human being in the world. Every human being, every second. What are we going to do with that data? Where is it? What is it doing? And the data generation is going to double again and double again. And by 2025, about 40 zettabytes, which is 40 trillion gigabytes. Can you do the math? It's really a lot of data out there. And it's so changing. It's mobile, it's paper, it's social media, images, video, sensors. And where we're going, we're seeing smarter algorithms, faster processing speed, include ways to look at it and improve ways to do it. But the key bottom line is there's a lot more data. And when COVID hit, what a lot of companies realized is the analytics they used prior to COVID are no longer applicable today. And with this type of data growth, I will bet you most of the analytics in your company are probably out of date because of the way the data is going. And not only the data, but the types of data and the way data is generated and how we're beginning to use it. And we're going to talk about that particularly later on, about how it's going to impact databases. And I'm going to repeat this a couple of times just to get you in there. One of the statements I like to use is if you're a company today with only one type of database, the likelihood you're going to be out of business in the next 10 years is very high. And we'll talk more about that. But those are some of the type of trends we're looking at. So if we look at this forecast, though, it has really begun to pick up. And with the Internet of Things and the other devices like that coming online, with autonomous systems coming online, with more robots coming online and things, the data is going to take off. Today on the Internet, over 73% of the data on the Internet is not human to human. It's machine to machine. That's a lot of data that isn't for us. It's really machines talking to machines. And so the way we look at data, how we use data, how we generate it, is dramatically changing. And if you look at the differences, if I go back 3 years, we had standalone Hadoop clusters. We had Hadoop tools, no real time. And development back then was really community driven. Today, if we look at it, we have integrated development environments. You know, I would be lost trying to do development today the way we did development 5 years ago. It just doesn't work. Large variety of tools, languages, in-house data science, security audit compliance, very different world today. Going back to real time, let's get you in a mindset first. Remember back when we would have data sent into us from a store, from a sensor, from a tool? We'd take it, we'll pull it into our data center. We'd do it would go into a database, we would analyze it, and then we would get a report out on the screen, and we'd say that was real time? That's not real time. It's near real time. We are moving today to a time when real time is becoming a driver. And that's why things like cloud architecture and things are changing, is to accommodate this big dramatic shift we're having in that area. Security audit compliance, God, it can't be even more important. I founded a healthcare company we sold a couple of years ago, and we were the only company ever to receive a perfect score on the high trust certification, and by the outside auditor. That really pushed our value up. It made it so much easier to sell the company. But that type of compliance is really critical today. You know, you saw the breach probably yesterday of one of the compliance companies had a 25 million person breach. And they're ones who does security. So come on now. And AI. I hate the term AI. I hate it. Most of the time when I talk about AI, I talk about machine learning, talk about natural language processing, I talk about tree diagrams, I talk about many different approaches to it. But AI is a generic term. Really, and I got started back in that very early when I was at the MCC Consortia. One of our researchers was a gentleman named Doug Lynette, and he wanted to do common sense AI. So if it's the street's wet out there, is it raining? Is it a sprinkler? Does somebody spill something? Most AI won't make that distinction even today. So how do you begin to make this and do more? So we've gone from AI to machine learning. We're headed to deep learning, and we're moving to a time where we're wanting to have general purpose AI. And general purpose AI is AI that doesn't need to be trained. Today, you need to spend probably half the time that you're developing an AI application is development, the other half is training. And that's a very important part. Give you a healthcare example. How many of you have heard the word provider in healthcare? What is it? Is it the doctor? Is it where the service was provided? Was it the institution? In healthcare, there's 16 different definitions of the word provider. So if I'm doing machine learning, natural language processing, and I see the word provider, which one do I choose? If you think about our language and our lexicon that we use, the same type of things are common in most industries. So you've got to go beyond those type of skills to understand how artificial intelligence can be used with you and how it's applicable to what you're doing. And it's gone from expert only to everywhere. And what's interesting about AI today is I got started in AI, 25 years ago. AI today is no longer experts. I can go and do artificial intelligence as a service today. I can go to most clouds, I can go to others, and I don't really have to know the tools. I just have to know domain knowledge. And I can begin to construct simple AI systems. And I can begin to link those together, federate those, and create more advanced AI as a service. So it's really gone from expert only to everywhere. And again, I doubted it, but when I looked at 70% and the 65% there and talked to people, that numbers feels pretty good now. Because you're seeing more and more, particularly small, medium-sized business, step up and use AI of various types. And, you know, you see all these deep learning neural networks are really there. You're going to see some changes in computer technology that are going to make these happen even more. And we're going to touch on some of those computer technologies coming up. But you know, something with AI went wrong. And let me give you an example, one that's my favorite. This is a machine translation with natural language processing. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Neat saying, right? Well, let me take that sign and let me translate it from English to Russian back to English. Okay? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. The vodka is strong, but the meat is rotten. That is an actual machine learning translation. Are we losing it somewhere there? That is some of the challenges you have with using this type of AI technology. It's so easy, and business today is what? Business today is global. I'm sorry, outside the personal services industry, what's the first thing we do? We put up a website and we become a global business, whether we want to or not. So it's global. And I say something often that gets me in trouble with chambers of commerce and with city councils. I say geography today is no longer about a point on a map. Geography today is where we can find the competencies and capabilities to do what we need to get done. You know, with working from home during COVID and stuff, it's really brought that point home for most people, that I can go and find the capabilities I want to do it. One of the things we do in my company, I do a lot of my testing in the Pacific Rim, in Vietnam and places like that. Why? When we hand off development from here, it's tested overnight. So when we come back in the office in the morning, guess what? We have test results. Dramatically speeds up our process. But again, does it matter that's being done there or here? They're all part of the team. And so you see those type of things used, and it helps us not get problems like this. One of the first places where companies should be using AI today is chatbot technology. One of my portfolio companies is called Universal Tutor, and we have a conversational avatar that's teaching social emotional learning to kids. But it is a full conversational chat box in essence. But you hear them all the time. Most of the time you hear chat box today or interact with them on the computer, you don't really realize they're a chat box. And they're doing it. Most of the times I go into a customer support or a tech support, particularly if I chat, it's not a person. It's a chat box interacting with you. And if you look at the areas from sales, real estate, e-commerce, AI, web, customer support, live chat, SMS messaging, and others, chat box are really become very common. And there's so many open source ones. If you're not using a chat bot in your companies today, even to do something as simple as tech support, customer support, where the answers are often the same, right? You should. It will really help you, or you'll build up a database. You'll see the problem sets more than having a person do it, because you'll take that data and you'll do something with it. So what are your to-dos with this? Follow the AI trends. Get what you can off the shelf. Today, there's so much out there. You have to have a compelling business case to create artificial intelligence from scratch. You really do. It's very different that way. Make sure you at least have some AI experts. They don't need to be the ones that write the codes, but they should be the ones that help you ask the right questions. Think about things like lexicon. Think about the places like how you want to store the data. where you want to collect the data? Do you want to federate the data in multiple types of databases? Oh, we'll come back to databases. But particularly with AI, we've heard of SQL, NoSQL. Yes, you should at least do it with those two, but there's more we'll talk about in it. But focus on the business need. Don't worry about the technology. The very, very, very best AI is invisible. You don't want to know that artificial intelligence is doing what you're being involved with. When it's invisible, it's good. A few are bringing AI to the many. Look at an internal one. Pick a solution that can scale. Start easy, scale up. And launch a service that quickly attracts a mass. That's why chatbots are so good as the first one to get your feet in the door. Then move them to things like the sales process. Move them to accounting. Move them to law. Both of those are going to be very disrupted by AI. I expect to see over half the lawyers go out of business. If you're not in front of a jury, AI is better than you are. So you'll begin to see things like that. Quantum computers, how many of you heard of quantum computers? Do you think most of you are going to use those in your company? Don't. Quantum computers are very interesting. The quantum computer market is going to be about the size of today's supercomputer market, around $60 billion. It's not going to be the ones where you have a quantum computer on your desktop. But quantum computers are very specialized as you look at them. The first commercially general purpose one will really happen about 2030. Our quantum computers that are out there in the markets today are what's called noisy quantum computers, the noisy immediate scale ones. They're going to be worth a couple of $100 million in the mid-20s. So about where we're coming up on, but they're not true quantum computers. Quantum computer security is going to be a big one, because if I look at encryption, encryption's all math. Quantum computers excel at math. Quantum computers do not do parallel processing, but they excel at math. If I'm looking for something where I'm doing like deep neural networks and learning like that, the trend you need to watch out for, and it's still further out than quantum computers, is something called biological computing. If you think about your brain, how many thought processes do you have going on at one time? Do you worry about telling your heart to beat? Do you worry about regulating your blood pressure and stuff? Well, that's what biological computing can do when you see there. It's probably going to hit mid-2030s as a commercial product. There's already biological computing being done in classified environments today. So it's really coming out there. But if you look today you have this really very simple, you're moving up to where you have universal quantum computing. Really around the end of this decade is where you'll see the first early commercial applications of that. But it's beginning to go, and it's going to be good. Anytime I'm doing number crunching, it's there. The way we do security today, most of us have passwords, right? I can break your password within a second or two with a quantum computer, if even that much. Our encryption keys on networks, it's a snap. I have software on my computer up here that can break most network encryption within a few hours as it is already. But quantum computing makes it almost instantaneous. And we're seeing our first quantum computing as a service happening now. It's the noisy and immediate quantum computing, but it's coming. So to kind of give you an idea, this is a D wave, and this is a noisy one. And this one is at Google. So that's there. This is part of the IBM, which is a 50-qubit true quantum computer. The lead in the world in quantum computer is China. Their quantum computers there are 400 to 500% larger than what we have here today. So there's a big race going on in quantum computing. This was the first quantum computer I got to play with. It was in a laboratory. And this one was back in about 2004, 2005. So you've seen they've come a long ways, but the types of computers are going to change. You know, we had general purpose computers most of our lives looking around the room. Then we started hearing about graphical processing units. Well, graphical processing units, another type of computer that was originally just doing math for your display, now it's doing a lot of your artificial intelligence processing. There's another type of computer chip called a morphological computer chip that changes states, lets it take on different personalities, so to speak. And there's floating point gate arrays that can be reprogrammed to do different things. Many of the chips in space are FPGAs on satellites, because you can't really go up there and change a chip out, can you? Change the computer out very easy. So you see things like that happen. Now, this post-quantum computer encryption, it's going to change life for every company. You're going to have to put a plan to place in your company, track it and follow it. And this is just some suggestion of look and see where it is, begin to put a mitigation in place, look at your data retention. You know, and ransomware is causing us to look at our data and retention even more so. You know, there's a ransomware attack somewhere in the world happening every 10 seconds today. And you see that. One of the things you want to do is you want to build your enterprise data, your enterprise application now in layers. We used to want to do things flat internally within our enterprise architecture. We now want to build it in layers so that we have layers where it can contain things like encryption hits. It can contain ransomware attacks and things. And by doing layers, it's quicker to recover and you don't lose as much information. And as we talk about databases, you're going to see an approach to databases called federation. I will talk about when we get there. That is part of this building things in layers. That's so important today as you're going forward. Autonomous mobile robots. How many of you have been served in a restaurant where the robot brought out your food? Oh, come on now. In Austin, I was in 2 restaurants last week with that. When I was up in DC a few weeks prior to that, a couple of restaurants there too. Great service. You're going to see robots becoming more and more common everywhere. Don't think they're going to take all your jobs, but they are going to displace some types of jobs. And you're going to see more robots become autonomous. The robots we saw in car plants and airplane plants building things were not autonomous. Everything was programmed on those. You're now beginning to see robots that can learn, adapt, and do things. It is going to impact you. And depending on your company, you need to keep track of these. The Internet of Things is making this a lot more possible because we're putting sensors everywhere. And sensors are digital, so they can share information. And they're connected, right? So we can pull these back into the systems to make them smarter. So you're going to see a lot more robots. And what's really interesting, if you look at the robot growth rates, we're in the mid of those. Look out where the robot growth rates are high. And again, they're going to come here whether we want it or not. So we need to keep up and understand they're coming. And then you see the whole autonomous cars. Well, you're going to see more and more autonomous trucks. Walmart announced a week and a half ago, they now have the first autonomous delivery trucks, not cross-country, but for in towns, where these are the flatbed type, the flat trucks, the boxy trucks, driving without even a safety driver in the cockpit up here in Oklahoma. So you're going to see more and more autonomous coming. You're going to see it go in commercial first, even more than in consumer. And these are the trends where we're going from feet off, hands off, eyes off, mind off. I can't wait to get to mind off. So I can get in my car and say, take me here, and I can do anything else I want to. But right today, with what we see in Tesla and other things like that, we can do feet off pretty well. We're beginning to get where we can do hands off. I wouldn't begin to think about doing eyes off today in a consumer car. But we're going the road. But you can see this thought process is going. So we are right here today. So there's a lot of growth and maturity coming in autonomous vehicles. But it takes a lot of data. So this is from Intel. So today in the average car, it generates about 4,000 gigabytes of information per day in your car. What is some of that information? I'm going to say a sexist comment, and I apologize. One of the things that most of us don't realize is when we get in the car today and sit in the front seat, the driver's seat, the passenger seat weighs us. And women hate that. But they're doing it so that it can adjust the amount of power in the airbags. That's data that's collected. How many of you think that when you turn your ignition switch, you start the engine? No, you're starting computers to go to other computers to go over to other computers. In the average car today, you're going through about 35 different type of processing units before the starter ever turns over in the car. So you're driving a supercomputer, whether you like it or not, more than you're driving a car. But this 4,000 gigabytes per day is just going to increase even more. I love this. We have to go for dinner tonight. The refrigerator isn't speaking to the stove. We're getting close to that. And you're seeing that, and we're seeing these trends beginning to hit. Because we do live in this data-centric, connected world. And this is how we're beginning to do things. We all heard about 5G. Today there's about 40 operators, about 5 million fixed modems. But fiber to the home and other high-speed internet service is so ubiquitous, in many places 5G doesn't deliver a particular advantage. But we are going to see 5G. Mobile 5G is great speeds. It does come with penalties. It takes more power. You have to have 20 times the number of cell towers as you do with LTE to deliver those type of speeds in 5G. So you're going to see all these micro cells come up and stuff. But 5G is, I'm looking forward to the speeds. But you have to look and see where it fits. It's supposed to do a 100-fold increase in traffic capacity. And we need that because, what? Data is doubling when? Every 2 years? It's got to go over these networks. Hardware and software 5G, a lot of hardware, particularly these ultra-wideband networks. So at 4,000 megabits a second, it's 400 times faster. It has to use smart antennas, though. We can't use dumb antennas. Even LTE services using smart antennas. And that's how we're able to get these small cell towers and how we're able to do things, cell circuits. Software, God, it will be a unified standard across all the different types of networks. Remember when Sprint and AT&T couldn't talk with each other wirelessly? 5G is going to solve those type of problems. And we're seeing more of software-defined radios. We're seeing software encryptions and the flexibility to do. I mean, when I travel internationally today, I can take my one phone anywhere because it's now become more of a software-defined phone. And we're seeing those services go. But if you look at some of them, in the United States, about 19% of our populations is wireless only. But look over in Turkey, look in Canada. Canada's 24% of the population is wireless only, and that's growing. I moved in Austin recently. I couldn't put up more with the Austin City Council, so I moved right outside of Austin. And I didn't move my landline. Now, I will admit I have a VoIP phone there too, in addition to my pure LTE wireless. But it didn't make sense for me to do a wireline anymore. And you begin to see those. So only 1 in 7 mobile connections, though, will be 5G by 2025. So if you're basing a business strategy around using particularly mobile 5G, I hope you have patient capital. Because it is going to take a while for you to have enough penetration in the marketplace to make a very strong business case of 5G mobile if only 1 in 7 will be using 5G by 2025. 2024, I might tell you a different story. But today, if that number holds, and I really think that one will, is going to be that type of challenge. Now, and here's another cartoon, I just have to do it. Another beer, please, Hal. I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. The bathroom scale and hall mirror says you're getting too fat. Guess what? We've been able to do that now for 7 years, 8 years. Where we are with image recognition, where we're using simple rules-based AI and stuff, real easy to do this. So this is not science fiction. This is really things we can do today, which if I'm an entrepreneur and talking about these things, I can create some really great business strategy around it. Blockchain, we've all heard of blockchain, right? I hate blockchain. Blockchain as a technology is a distributed ledger. And using it for transparency is great. But then we hear blockchain and cryptocurrency in the same breath. We hear blockchain being very secure in the same breath. It's not today. I can break into blockchains reasonably easy with some time. Because you see it. It's really a family of ledgers, though. And it's where it's maintained by peers rather than central authority. And this peer-to-peer is what makes it really great. What causes some of the risks, though, too. So this is the way it goes. So you request, it's transferred to the nodes verify it. Then it broadcasts and says, what other nodes can I connect and transfer this blockchain to? Then it votes and say, okay, I can take it here. This is a place where you see most of the vulnerabilities of blockchain today. If I can spoof enough nodes and I can vote 51%, I just took over that blockchain. And since I now have taken it over, I can change the data in there and then rebroadcast it out with new data. And yes, can I go back to that first one? Yeah, but most people don't. Because it changes at each one of those steps. So the use of blockchain is great, but there's fixing. There's public blockchain, there's private blockchain. Private is more secure than public. But you are seeing that. And you begin to see it goes from distributed ledger to blockchain to other platforms in here. There's other distributed ledger technologies like Hashgraph and things, which I actually like as well too. It's a little bit more secure, where blockchain's mostly open. Hashgraph is mostly encrypted. So you see different changes in there. But these are things you should track if blockchain's important to you, because this whole distributed ledger technology is changing very rapidly right now, and we're beginning to see it. You see cryptocurrency. Good growth is dominated by a few, a lot coming on board every day. The government is still the wild card on here, because governments are saying, we're going to outlaw it here, outlaw it there. Why? How does countries regulate their economy? Through the national banks, right? I can change inflation, I can do that. Change the value of the dollar. I can't do that if I'm on a cryptocurrency. So you're seeing that come in. And there's still security problems and bankrupts. If you lose your private key, you've lost all your Bitcoins. You've lost all your cryptocurrency. So do keep that in mind as you're going there. My company, we're actually doing a cryptocurrency exchange that's getting around a lot of the security problems. We now have 4 servers in orbit. And we're going to probably be using those as part of our solution. So again, a lot of opportunities, but you have to think outside the box. Internet of Things is huge. If you're not in Internet of Things today, you need to get there. And it's everywhere. Home, infrastructure, surveillance, healthcare, everywhere. If you can think of measuring something, sensing something, that's where Internet of Things is. It is huge. And it's one of the hottest things there. And what's really interesting on the Internet of Things today, there's not a market leader. There's a lot of companies doing it, but there's just not a market leader as you look at where we're headed and what we're doing. And so the whole Internet of Things is one where your companies have a lot of opportunities and entrepreneurs have a lot of opportunities. You know, can I make a sensor that reads things? In my office, I'm also office in Dallas, in Frisco. I love looking before I go to my corporate apartment up there at the television cameras there by TxDOT. It's better than the electronic ones to tell me how bad the traffic is. Because what? It's real time. And even services like Waze, Google Map, and others, there's a delay in getting you that real time information. So, but this Internet of Things is beginning to get there. And they're collaborative, they're talking a lot with each other. And if you begin to look at it, the adoption is on this steep curve right here. And we're at the very base of it. I'm also a professional futurist. Anytime your market penetration goes between 5 and 10%, that technology is going to go to something called substitution. That's not necessarily 100%, but it goes to what the market will bear. And those technologies are really there, and it's going to go to substitution today. And if you look at the ecosystem, this is an eye test. These will be online. It is in every industry, every place you see it. And again, generating a ton of data. It's all connected. And it's going to push and change the way we do business. I mean, today, I can put a beacon in a grocery store, a warehouse store, and I can tell you if you take the product off the front of the shelf or the 1/3 deep by using Internet of Things technologies and stuff. So it's everywhere you're going. We've heard of smart buildings. Internet of Things is going to change smart buildings. Some of the new lights going into centers like this, they're IP generated. They're being powered off of Internet Protocol, power over Ethernet, and they have the ability to do thermal imaging, so they can tell if we have a temperature. They actually can develop, fluorescent light tubes can now generate Wi-Fi. So we don't have to have necessarily an internet access point like we have here. The new generation of Internet of Things lighting, it can be a Wi-Fi itself. It's called LA-Fi for Light-Fi. So you see those going. So Internet of Things is going to change a lot of what we're doing. We hear about smart cities. I hate the term smart cities because most cities have too much legacy infrastructure. I prefer to talk about smart communities. And you connect smart communities. It can be in the same geographical area or spread out more, because what I say earlier, geography is not about a point on the map. Smart communities are the same way. I can build smart communities that are within a city, within a region, within a state, within a country, or link them internationally too. So these whole smart communities are going to become more important. Great opportunity for companies, because if I get embedded in this smart infrastructure, it's much easier for me to capture, keep, and maintain customers. They're sticky. So you're going to see that being very important. And IT and Internet of Things are different. IT, any to any, Internet of Things, there's a hierarchy. Why? Most of them don't have security on them, or very little security. So you go through a hierarchy. Network posture, CIA confidentiality, Internet of Things really availability, and then integrity and confidentiality. Security, cyber, most of Internet of Things today is physical access control, which is also why they're hierarchical, because you've got to put cybersecurity somewhere up there. Most of the devices are low power devices. They cannot handle it. A response to attacks, let me shut down. Well, Internet of Things really have to be nonstop mostly. I mean, if Internet of Things is controlling my street lights, Do I want to take all the lights in Oklahoma City down because of a cyber attack? No, you've got to begin to look at them in a different way. So this is some of the changes as you as a business need to take as you begin to adapt that type of technology. New challenges require new thinking. We're too used to a data center, or we're too used to a cloud. Clouds are changing. We're going to talk a bit more about it. We're going to talk about edge of cloud in a minute. With Internet of Things, edge of cloud becomes very important. Edge of cloud says, let me put computing capability as close to the source of data, as close to the source of action as I can. And then sync up with the central cloud and stuff as I can. But Internet of Things is going to push that even harder. So enhanced edge computing. You push it out there. You're going to see cloud and edge computing as complementary to each other. If you haven't thought of edge of cloud computing, in the next week or two, search it and get a little bit more familiar with it. It's really kind of an interesting diagram, because if the old place is you would have all your data here and with the apps behind them, today these apps and things are being pushed out to the edge. And yes, you have something, I love the name here, Edge Fog Manager. But what you create is a fog environment with all these edge of cloud computers that can talk to each other, talk to things, go back to the central cloud or the company data center when needed. But you now have this federation among all these devices going forward. And I hate to tell you, this has to happen today, because we want to go to real time. I mean, if I'm doing something, I have to make a decision. Do I hit the car or do I hit the kid? I want that decision to be made out there if I can, without having to go back to a corporate data center to make that decision, right? And you're seeing those type of computing needs in everything today. I got into business where a company ran their books once a month. Then it went to writing the books once a week. Then daily, what? Our books are updated in real time now. If I have data in my books that's more than 10 minutes old, I'm hurting. But we've changed, and this whole world is changing that way. And if you're looking at it, this is a survey among CIO and business leaders. Internet of Things is very important, and particularly as you look at it in private clouds and you look at it at the edge. So you're seeing that coming generically across business now. If you're not keeping up with it, do. I love these charts. I have these going back to probably 2014. But what is interesting on this is if you look at what is on the internet every 60 seconds, and you look and see the differences. So today, LinkedIn, 9,132 connections made every 60 seconds. Text messages, God, just tremendously high. 200,000 people tweeting every 60 seconds. And I admit sometimes I'm one of those doing the tweeting that fast and things too. But there's a lot of data. Now what? We're doubling data every 2 years. This is part of where it's coming from. So we're entering the age of data. Data is the central business asset. It's the organization's soul. The next word's very important, non-depletable. People come and leave. Inventory comes and leaves. The data stays with you. So it's non-depletable, non-degraded, it's a durable asset. Data generation has changed forever. I remember the day where people produced most of the data in the company, right? Not any longer. Oldest quote you're going to hear at a tech conference. I love this quote. All things are flowing from Euripides, 500 BC. Why do I like that quote? If your data is not flowing, if you are not using your data, what value has it? If I just have data sitting over there not being used, what's the data's value to the company? Yes, you need to keep historical data, But your best data comes from this 500 BC. You want it to flow. You want to use it. And even if you have older data, it's going to change how you store it, how you do things. You might go from real-time storage to near real-time storage to archival storage. A lot cheaper and stuff. But you're going to see how that changes. Databases. God, I told you I was going to get to this one. These are all different types of databases. And you can see the growth patterns. This top one is one I particularly like. It's called a graph database. Most of you have seen the matrix, right? Remember the matrix? Make that into a database and be able to look at data in 3 dimensions in real time in different areas. That's what a graph database is. But here's the one I think most of us can use, is if I look at the trends of just the last 24 months and what it's doing. You see up here, this one is called a time series database. Most of you are old enough. Do you ever remember seeing on television this stuff that would show up sometimes at the bottom of the screen, where it was days, hours, minutes, seconds, frames? That's a time series database. So if you're doing something where time is important, duration is important, when an event started, when it ended, why would you want to put those in a SQL database? Why would you want to put them in Oracle or Microsoft DB or one of those, where it doesn't understand time? Time series are a great database for that. And again, there's others up here. There's free text databases, key values, others up here. The strategy I'm going to tell you to do is you want to federate your databases. Use the appropriate database for your data, and then have the databases talk with each other. And what's neat about this, I can enhance my security because I can encrypt each database differently. I can put some personal identification here, some over here, some over here, and God, if there's a breach on one database, you don't get everything. But federated databases are really the future. And that's why you heard me say earlier, if you only have one type of database, this is why. Use the appropriate database for the data you're having, the data you're using. Relational databases, SQL, Postgres, really suck when it comes to data science. And that's a technical term. And open source versus commercial. God, this is a great chart. Red's the commercial, blue's the open source. Gee, more people are using open source databases than commercial databases now. And it does vary by industry as you look at those. But open source is a very viable alternative to today, particularly in databases, because it's just a storage mechanism, right? And with them being open sources, it's actually easier to federate because all those interfaces and things are open source. So I can put a middleware federation engine in place that makes it easy through APIs and something called SPIs, system APIs, to talk across the back end in the back office between your databases. And it's an approach you really should consider. Again, top databases. Oracle's number 1. Ooh, MySQL 2. Microsoft 3. Oh, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Wow. Most of the top 10 are open source. Again, it's something you should consider going together because this is where the world is changing. And this is a trend, if your company doesn't know it, it's going to impact you. And here's just an overall ranking of time series databases because I'm always asked this question. So it's in the slide deck. I've used 2 of these. My last company, we used Inflex. And in my current company and some of our companies, we own multiple companies, we use Inflex and we use Pythagoras. But they're very good databases to use because so much of what we do takes time into account. So you begin to see those. Oh, I have to do this one. Father, I have sinned. The priest, I already know on Facebook. We have data everywhere. And that growth of data is going to continue to go. And it really is going to happen and change how we use data. We're trying to put Band-Aid privacy rules in place, and those, well, I'm sorry. Most of us, when we're asked about privacy, when we go to a website and it says cookies, you don't go in there and say, I only want to accept this one type. And how many of you have heard of GDPR in the California CCPA with the right to be forgotten? I need somebody to explain this to me. So if I click the box that says I want to be forgotten, but the law says if I come back to that site again, you have to remember that I clicked the box to say be forgotten. So let me get this. I'm forgotten, but it has to remember me. Sure. So privacy is this real misnomer we have out there. We gave up privacy when we went from bartering to currency, if you think about it. Because as we did currency, we began to give up privacy. And it's really there. So a couple of conclusions. Age of data is here. Data is the central business asset. Data generation has changed. The world is moving to real time because everything is digital. Everything's connected. And if I'm digital and connected, it's changing the way I can deal with data and processing and everything. Your legacy analytics software fail. It's not designed for everywhere. It's not designed for the volumes and the velocity of data and the varieties. It's going to fail. Once you go to federated databases, which is why most companies are resistant, it's going to fail. But you don't have the right data to make decisions today because you're trying to stick everything in one place. Crisis of software, scale, data governance is going to change. Streaming data changes the concept of data. That's why time series is important, because so much of our data is streaming. Again, time is important. And think about where the data comes from. If you're not using public data today, slap your hand. There's so much good public data that businesses can use. You don't have to generate all the data you use in your company yourself. How many remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Is that applicable still today? I lecture a lot on university campuses too. I have to tell you, this is my ego moment. I have a Smith hierarchy of needs. And it starts out with food, water, shelter, transportation, internet, mobile phones, social networking. Most students tell me that's right. Think about your companies today. We're at a unique inflection point in our companies. We have 5 generations in the workforce at the same time now. Each of the generations communicate different ways. Do you take that in strategy within your company? How can I communicate with an 18-year-old today versus a 67-year-old? Do you know what the fastest growing segment in the workforce is today? 63 and above. This is a trend that you're going to have to know. Because I like this one. What brings civilization to the Goths, the Vandals, the Huns, the geeks? Really today, we've seen with ransomware and everything else, geeks are really powerful. I can do a lot. And it's really there. But that's kind of what I want to cover today. I have time for a couple of questions. Any questions? Because I know I covered a lot. Any questions? Come on now, don't be shy. So the blockchain vulnerabilities. You're seeing more and more blockchains become private blockchains. So you control who you broadcast to. You can control who responds. Many of the early blockchains just said over the internet, who's listening? Do you want to do this? That presents a problem. There's new types of blockchains where there's different encryption things. Many of the early blockchains were not encrypted. Most of the new blockchains are encrypted. So you have that. But the key of a blockchain is doesn't use a central authority on encryption, which is how most encryption is done today. So you have to create what's called a mobile authority. And there's now companies out there selling these type of authorities that can move in things, and it's a different way to authenticate, to decrypt, and to encrypt again. But those are some of the different techniques you can use. But private's the easiest way. Those others are more involved, but it's where the industry's dramatically headed. One more question? Is there anything on the horizon that can do something about crypto? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of crypto going now that doesn't require mining. And if you look, where the energy use for crypto came was on initial coin offerings. Initial coin offerings are on a steep decline. And, you know, the SFPs and other things like that are ways to get away from mining. And you're seeing more and more approaches where you don't have to use the massive server farms. Yes, there's still some of them out there. And unfortunately, Texas is taking a lot of them since Singapore and others have cracked down on it. And they're moving there. You're seeing a lot in South America, particularly Brazil, where the energy use is up high. But this new technology understands that's not sustainable and that you can't really do it anymore in the future. And so that's kind of where that's headed and what that's doing. And a great question, but you saw generation 1, we're actually beginning to move in generation 3 of cryptocurrencies and mining. And that massive mining was a generation 1 phenomenal. Guys, thank you so much. I'm going to be around. And congratulations on your new convention center.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article that offers some tips for crafting an agile enterprise architecture. Digital transformation, business agility, and enterprise architecture are frequently heard terms in this era of digital technologies and rapid change. Digitalized applications, solutions, and processes have enabled organizations to increase efficiencies, which then allows them to respond to shifting customer needs and trends in a more flexible and agile manner. The adoption of a more agile approach has been gathering steam, and businesses that are building agility into their processes are seeing the payoffs. The results are greater productivity, faster time to market, and increased customer satisfaction. This article looks at some of the many benefits of an agile architecture and the 3 requirements for attaining agility across the entire business. And we have an interesting take on 6 DevOps technology trends to watch. As we start the new year and the world enters a post-digital era, organizations are exploring disruptive technology trends. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, intelligent process automation, advanced analytics, and robotic process automation are among the top DevOps technology trends to watch. This article looks at the 6 trends that are emerging from these technologies and ways in which organizations can use the technologies in their DevOps processes and tools to optimize their business processes and adapt to the changing market needs. Also on DevOps.com, we look at the state of open source observability. Observability is growing in importance to meet envisioned business objectives. But despite the benefits to performance data, organizations have faced challenges in realizing the full potential of observability based on implementation, distributed software tools, and other technological hurdles. With new innovation, however, we may be entering the era of true observability. This article looks at why that may be the case and the role of open telemetry and the extended Berkeley packet filter in making it happen. All right, over on Container Journal, we have news from Loft Labs, which has updated its vCluster open source cluster virtualization software to add support to any vanilla distribution of Kubernetes. Previously, the open source vCluster project only supported the lightweight K3s instances of Kubernetes. The goal is to make it easier for IT teams to employ vCluster beyond pre-production environments and into staging and production environments. As Kubernetes is employed more widely, many IT teams will be looking to centralize cluster management as much as possible. Many IT teams deploy multiple single-tenant Kubernetes clusters because they prefer to have their own dedicated platforms rather than having to monitor other applications' resource consumption. But that can be complex to manage and can increase the total cost of IT. Loft Labs is making a case for using vCluster as a layer of abstraction to simplify isolating each application running on a multi-tenant Kubernetes cluster rather than simply relying on namespaces. And Ambassador Labs has updated its app dev platform for building cloud-native applications to include a free tier for individual developers. The Ambassador Cloud is based on the Ambassador Developer Control Plane, a set of open source components that includes Envoy proxy software, the Argo continuous delivery platform, the Emissary Ingress API gateway, and telepresence traffic management software for microservices running on Linux and Windows platforms. All four of these components are being advanced under the Cloud Native Computing Foundation after Ambassador Labs contributed Emissary Ingress and telepresence to the CNCF. The free tier is intended to expose individual developers to the platform, which is designed to make it easier for them to build cloud-native applications without the need for intervention from an IT operations team. Developers can also upgrade to a paid plan for Ambassador Cloud starting at $5 per month. All right, over on Security Boulevard, we have an article that offers up the specifics around the recent extradition of Russian hacker Vladislav Klyushin, I think it is, who was arrested in Switzerland for cybercrimes in March 2021. He was arrested for his alleged involvement in a global scheme to trade on non-public information stolen from U.S. computer networks that netted tens of millions of dollars in illegal profits. That's according to an indictment from the Department of Justice, which also detailed his alleged connection with Russian cyber criminals and his role in a conspiracy to obtain unauthorized access to computers and to commit wire fraud and securities fraud, and with obtaining unauthorized access to computers, wire fraud, and securities fraud. His co-defendant, Ivan Ermakov, was an officer of the Russian GRU, which is the Russian main intelligence directorate, the military intelligence, and was previously charged in July 2018 for his role in hacking in a hacking and influence effort related to the 2016 U.S. elections. They are alleged to have hacked into two separate U.S.-based filing agents used by U.S. companies to file required paperwork with the Security Exchange Commission and accessed information about upcoming public financial declarations. The information gleaned from these forays allegedly gave the co-conspirators the opportunity to engage in financial transactions based on insider information and obtain lucrative returns on investments from the purchase and sales of shares of stock. And finally, we offer up some ways to make working with personal data less risky. When assessing risk in your organization, the first step is to define the scope of your information assets, especially those that could impact the confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility of information within your company. That includes any risks that affects assets that process, store, and transmit personal data. You can reduce and nullify these risks with security controls. This article looks at the risks related to access management, data security, development and testing, device security, and data transfer, and provides some tips to help IT organizations make their lives just a little bit easier. All right, that's it for the headlines today. I'll be back tomorrow with a fresh new batch. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with two very, very smart women talking about cybersecurity. And I want to introduce to you Mary Galloway, who is the CEO of the Women's Society of Cyberjitsu, and Megan Saul, who is the VP of Research and Marketing at InfoSec. Thank you both so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having us on.
So I want to talk to you about your recent collaboration. I think it was early December. You guys announced a partnership program. InfoSec came out with the InfoSec Gives partner program, and the first partner is the Women's Society of Cyberjitsu. I'm going to trip over that every single time, I know. I wonder if you guys can tell me a little bit about that partnership, what you guys hope to accomplish with it. Really, what is InfoSec Gives? Why don't we start with that?
Yeah, that sounds like a great place to jump off. And then Mary, go ahead and run with it for what your goals are on your side of things. So we have a formal corporate giving program called InfoSec Gives. And it's not just scholarships and things like that we do with the industry. It's also an internal program for our staff. So it's basically donating 1% of people, products, and our time. And so we do volunteering, we fundraise, there's matching, things like that we do at the corporate level. And then within that program falls our InfoSec scholarship program. We actually created the InfoSec Give scholarship program just this year. And so what that does is it allows us to extend that same sort of motion and muscle that we've built, right, with our existing scholarship program that was kicked off in about 2018 to a wider community. So we all know how hard it can be to crowdsource funding and resources and training, right, for these scholarship opportunities. We're able to offer our InfoSec Skills platform, give away 3 lifetime scholarships to any participating partner. They get to set the rules, they get to pick the winners. It can really support whatever it is that they're trying to push in the community. And obviously we have a lot in common because we are all interested in helping fill that cybersecurity skills gap and skills shortage. And that's really where Mari's org comes into play. So
yeah, I've known about InfoSec for a long time, a number of years. And when they came to us and said, "Hey, we have this new program," I was like, yes. The whole thing about our organization is we want to provide affordable training to women and girls that want to enter into the field. And a lot of our members don't have the funds to spend, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to get training. And so this came at the perfect time. And we chose, the first folks that we chose were award winners that were volunteers of the organization that I knew specifically would benefit from this program. And the fact that it's lifetime, you get access to the entire program, the entire platform. And as updates happen, as more programs and more classes and more training come along, you get access to that. I thought that was really fantastic. And so for us, we like to partner with organizations that have those kind of products because it helps offset some of the training that we do with local people from the community. We have different workshops and trainings. And this is just one of those things that fits nicely into that ecosystem, and having the ability to offer our members a wider range of training opportunities is really important to us.
That's great. So tell me a little bit about women in cyberjitsu.
You can call us WSC, right?
Yeah,
it's a tongue twister, right?
Yeah.
Cyberjitsu itself, the name came from our founder. She's Lisa Jiggets. She's from Japan, and she's also an artist. So you might see some of her paintings and stuff in hotels and whatnot. But she wanted to mix the art of cyber together, and that's where this comes from. Because cybersecurity is like an art. You have to different strokes and different, palettes and colors and different things that go into making the full picture. And so she brought that in, but we got our start in 2012 in Northern Virginia. And so we started with the Backtrack workshop. Actually coming up this June will be the start of our 10-year anniversary. So we've been around for 10 years, go figure. Providing this hands-on training around Security Plus, Network Plus, malware analysis, digital forensics, pretty much the whole gamut of cybersecurity disciplines, and giving women an opportunity to explore the field and feel comfortable asking questions and feel comfortable with, learning this stuff. They say that, well, women aren't interested. Well, it's not true, right? Our membership base is over 3,500, and we have more women and participants in our programs than just that. So there is an interest. We also do cyber games. We like to do CTF. So we have a whole CTF group that will build CTFs. They play CTFs together. Those are the cyber competitions. And it's what we love, and what I really like about this is that when somebody figures something out for the very first time, like, oh, I got that flag, or, oh, I figured out how to access that box, and that light bulb goes off and says, I really can do this and I like this. That's what we look for. And that's what we're trying to provide for our membership.
Are the majority of your members people who are in other fields, or are they students who are coming into trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives? Or
that depends. We have a wide range. So we have 3 buckets of members. The first bucket are going to be entry-level folks that may have no experience in cybersecurity or very limited experience. They may come from different career fields. We have a lot of folks that come from like the business side of things with that business mindset, which is really important, by the way, to understand the business side of cybersecurity. We also have what we call boomerangs. So women that they were in the industry at one point, they left to take care of family, have kids, do some other things, and then they're coming back into the space and they're like, yeah, I want to do this. And then the more senior folks. So the folks that have kind of been with us for a long time that are transitioning from that individual contributor to manager or leader. We have a number of those folks. We always encourage folks from different industries to take a career in cybersecurity, because those skills from, being the account manager, being in the finance department, or being a librarian directly translate to skills in cybersecurity that are needed. And so we have a wide variety of people.
So having an organization such as yours, I think it's amazing to begin with. I think it's a great asset for the cybersecurity community in general. And I keep hearing so much about the fact that we don't have enough qualified cybersecurity personnel. So I see how this very, very much would fill the gap. But I also see that you are in rabid disagreement with that. The fact that, and I want to get into that. But I wonder, what was it about women specifically that you guys are focusing on kind of encouraging and furthering the career? I mean, you did say that, women, there's this misnomer that women aren't interested. I think women are intimidated sometimes when it comes to, because, in it being kind of a male dominated industry, sometimes it's hard to make your voice heard. So, yes. But, I'd love to hear why you guys really focused on women specifically in cybersecurity.
Because we typically were the only ones in an organization. So Lisa was like the only person at her work, and she really wanted to do hacking, and she would go to these different events, and she'd ask questions, and it'd be like, well, you should already know that. That kind of attitude. And for me, I actually stumbled upon Cyberjitsu because I had failed my CISSP, and somebody said, get a study group to help you study. And I just happened to look on Meetup and was like, CISSP study group, women in cybersecurity. Okay, let me see what this is about. Right. I wasn't paying attention to the fact that there was an issue, even though there was an issue even with my first job. And so she tried it to see what it would be like. So that first workshop, she was like, let me just host this and see if there's others in the same situation. And there was like 30 or 40 women in the workshop, plus the folks on virtual, because we do virtual stuff too. And so it was like, there's something here. There's women that are interested in this. We don't know if they're afraid, if they're intimidated, like you said, if they just don't know that the opportunity exists. But let's do something to help them see that there is an opportunity, and to show them that you're not alone in this space if you decide you want to come over here.
It makes sense. And Megan, I certainly don't want to leave you out of the conversation. Sorry about that. I'm interested in finding out what from an InfoSec perspective, what was it about this organization specifically, and even kind of before that, what is it about, or why did you guys come to the collaboration that you did, or the partnership that you did, when you were coming up with the idea of what are we going to offer as part of this InfoSec Gives partner program, how did you guys come to kind of pull together what you did?
Yeah, it all kind of goes back to when we first kicked off the scholarship program in 2018. So I came from a non-cybersecurity background. And when I started in a content marketing role, actually, so I was doing a lot of like blog writing and interviews and things like that. And it really resonated with me, right? That there's this representation, diversity issue within our industry. And then of course, just like a lack of candidates generally, because it kind of goes back to like my own experience, right? So when I think back to when I was in high school, I graduated in high school in 2006. We were doing like, CSS, HTML, and I loved it, right? My friends and I still have like some of my original websites on floppy disks just because I think it's funny. And we loved it. We had so much fun. Everyone told us to be like English teachers or like artists, and had someone told me in 2006, hey, Megan, do you want to make way more money and have stronger job opportunities in front of you if you continue down this path? I would have loved to have had that conversation. And I think it's just a lack of awareness that there's even all this potential out there, right? And we know that representation matters. I like to go back to one analogy where if you ever went out to like a sports bar with your friends in college and you walk in the door and it's just like 50 dudes sitting there, you kind of want to walk out, right? And that's kind of what our industry is facing right now. And it's really simplified, obviously, hot take on that. But so I actually asked our CEO, Jack Cozio, I said, can we do something about this, right? Like, can we start the scholarship program up? It's not going to like solve all the world's problems, but it can, create some noise, get some people interested, and take at least one of the risks away from entering a brand new field. And that's the cost, right, of getting skilled enough to land that first job. And so we built the program from there, and then it's decided to extend it to the partner ecosystem because bottom line, like we sell training, that's our business model, but there's so much business to go around. We don't need to get hung up on like the nickels and dimes associated with this. The reality is the whole industry benefits, right? When we place more people in these positions, make them better at their jobs. There's enough to go around, and there's a whole lot of work that still needs to be done. And that's the primary driver for this. So
that's great. That's great. So, Mary, I take it that you don't believe that there is a dearth of qualified or qualified personnel, cybersecurity personnel.
Yes and no. I think the issue is organizations not knowing where to go to find them, right? I think the issue is not wanting to train people. They want you to already be the unicorn to come in and know, 15 different programming languages and, 30 different certifications, and then only get paid $50,000. It's like, yeah, no, that's not, you're not going to find that person because it doesn't make sense. Right. There's plenty. I've known folks that have been trying to find jobs for a couple of years and they have a lot of skills and they can't get their foot in the door. Allowing that opportunity to happen, saying, hey, let's partner with an organization like Cyberjitsu or any of these other nonprofits and say, let's work with the people you have in your organization to help skill them up to get this job here, right? That's one way to fix that issue. The other way is change your job descriptions. I look at job descriptions all the time and I'm like, who has a PhD in cyber? Right. With 15 years of experience? The PhDs in cybersecurity just came out. So doesn't make sense, right? And so there's a number of organizations working now to help change that, right? There's plenty of women that would apply for jobs, but usually we don't because we don't think we meet 100% of the criteria. Right. There's been jobs I'm looking at like, I want to be a vice president, but I don't meet all 10 of those things, even though I can do the job. And so I self take myself out, and it's just like, there's plenty. I feel like there's enough qualified folks to start making a difference and start changing what we've been doing for the last few years. Everybody's training everybody. People are getting SAN certifications. There's no reason that you can't. People are going through the InfoSec program, getting skilled because I've seen their stuff. I've looked at their their hands-on activities and all their programming, there's no reason you shouldn't get a job if you're able to articulate this to someone and say, and it doesn't have to be the job of the senior architect because you're not there yet. Mm-hmm. But for an entry-level role, why not?
Totally. I always like to say that like cybersecurity as a marketing like problem, essentially. We've made it so complicated and there's all this mystique that kind of like it's surrounded in, and it's everything that's complicated can be broken down into much simpler steps, right? And a path to get into it. And we know, I mean, Mary, you hinted at this before, we know women are so much less likely to apply for jobs that they don't hit every bullet point on, but like no one does. And right. I think, and if we can do anything, here at InfoSec is to help point that out and help people kind of get away from that imposter syndrome. I mean, I think all of us on this call probably know what that feels like. You just need a couple people to say like, hey, this isn't this hard. Like we can help you follow this path. You're going to be just fine. So,
right. That's great. And I applaud the efforts of InfoSec to help advance cybersecurity among pretty much any underserved community in cybersecurity. And Mary, I applaud you for you and the WSC. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Because I'm done trying to actually. So, but I do applaud your efforts as well in helping advance females in cybersecurity, because you guys bring up a lot of really important points about just the difference in the way we meaning women view jobs and our ability to thrive in those environments without having 100% of the job qualifications and being able to tick off every single box. And likewise as well, it is, as I said earlier, it's traditionally a male-dominated industry, and sometimes it can feel tough on a day-to-day basis. Just every day's like hazing. And so some people like, don't want to deal with that. So I do applaud you guys for kind of broadening the conversation and really making folks aware that there is a seat at the table for women in cybersecurity. So kudos to you both. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thanks very much for letting us know. And Megan, if folks are interested in finding out more about the InfoSec Gives program or the scholarships that you guys have available, can they just go to the InfoSec website?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's infosecinstitute.com. That's our full business name. And also any other partners, right? The more the merrier. I think it's going to take an industry-wide initiative to fix this issue, whether that's an issue of not enough candidates or not giving them the right guidance and support right along the way. So we would love to hear from you if you want to partner.
Great. And then Mary, if folks want to know more about the Women's Society of Cyberjitsu, do you have a website? I got it.
You got it this time.
Check out the website.
Yep. So Women's Cyberjitsu, that's JUTSU.org, has tons of information out there. You can join, you can be a member, you can be a sponsor, you can be a donor, you can volunteer if you want to teach. We love to bring in folks to come and teach topics in cybersecurity. We have a Linux workshop coming up, and we're planning out the rest of the year for those hands-on workshops to get those skills into the right hands.
Awesome. Well, thanks again to both of you for coming on Techstrong TV and letting us know all about this good stuff all the way around. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Hey, everybody. Happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with a webinars preview. As I always tell you, we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Here are 3 that are happening this week so that you can mark your calendar and join us. The first one is called Enterprise DevOps Series, GitHub for Mainframe Demo. This one is happening Tuesday. That's tomorrow, folks, January 11th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It is sponsored by Broadcom. With modern IDEs, Git and CI/CD pipelines, developing ZOS-based applications can be as productive and streamlined as any other platform. The session will feature a comprehensive demo and a Q&A covering the use of GitHub tools with mainframe native ones like Endeavor to optimize productivity through automation. A hybrid approach empowers next gens without disrupting career mainframers whose workflows are optimized around traditional tools. The live demo will illustrate how opening the mainframe to modern DevOps tools reduces cycle times while facilitating hybrid cross-platform applications. Good stuff. The second one is called Securing Infrastructure as Code from Tampering and Misconfigurations. This one is happening Tuesday also, January 11th at 3 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. This one is sponsored by Cycode. Moving applications and development to the cloud has delivered operational benefits at scale. Faster release cycles and microservices architectures drive complexity and a need for speed that can only be solved by automation via infrastructure as code. However, deploying new tools creates new attack surfaces, and infrastructure as code is no different. So some of the key takeaways from this webinar: what is infrastructure as code and why is its adoption rapidly increasing? Where in the software development lifecycle you should scan, securing infrastructure as code in a developer-friendly way, what types of security misconfigurations should you be looking for, preventing compromise of infrastructure as code itself, and so much more. It's going to be a great webinar. The last webinar I want to let you know about today is called Log4j, Tales from the Trenches, the State of Log4j Remediation. This one is happening Wednesday, January 12th at noon Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by WhiteSource. The announcement of a Log4j vulnerability sent security and development teams into a tailspin, not once, but multiple times. Throughout it all, WhiteSource has been providing tools for discovery and automated remediation and working closely with its customers. So they've learned a lot over the course of the last month or so that the Log4j vulnerability has been around. And some of the things that they're going to be talking about in this webinar will include what percentage of organizations have been affected by the Log4j vulnerability, how common were Log4j instant transitive dependencies compared to direct dependencies, how quickly were the best performing organizations able to find and fix Log4j vulnerabilities? What best practices can help an organization get through an exercise such as this quickly and easily? What factors cause some organizations to struggle more than others? And finally, what percentage of Maven packages are still vulnerable and being downloaded? This is a must if your organization is working with open source software and either knows or doesn't know whether there is a Log4j vulnerability lurking somewhere. Definitely want to check out this one. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview. Please check back with me tomorrow when I'll have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day. Please, whatever you do, stay safe. All right, welcome back. Next up, we've got Mitch Ashley in his Analyst Corner, and he is joined in this one by Judith Hurwitz and Dan Kirsch. All 3 of them are with Techstrong Research, and so they talk about some of the things that have occurred in 2021 and moving into 2022 as trends of solidifying with so many different trends, including solidifying software as a key business strategy, also normalizing everything digital, and the acceptance of low code, no code as a tool for IT and business. There are some other things that they discuss, but I don't want to give it all away, so let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this Techstrong Research kind of wrap up for 2021 and looking into 2022. I'm joined by my co-founders, Judith Hurwitz and Dan Kirsch. We work together a lot as part of Techstrong Research. We wanted to not talk about every trend that happened this past year, but the things kind of carrying forward going into 2022. So for this year, 2021, while we're recording this, one of the topics that we talked about is sort of the normalizing of digital, like everything becoming digital. We thought we would snap back to some new normal. Well, no, we snapped forward to something that's brand new, where it's all digital and it's not going back. I mean, how has that changed things from your view, Judith?
Yeah, so clearly there's no going back. Even though maybe we won't all be on Zoom forever, the nature of business has changed, and software is really defining what business is. This idea of the software supply chain, but there are a lot of nuances to this. Whether it's the organizational issues, where the C team all understands the value and the importance of moving to this new digital environment defined by software, has the message really filtered down to the rest of the organization? And I would suggest it hasn't yet. And until organizations really adapt and understand what it means to get the whole organization aligned, it isn't going to work. And that's why you're seeing, so many articles and pronouncements about the fact that such a high percentage of digital transformation efforts have not been successful. So I think we're going to see in this coming year that organizations are recognizing that it's not just software, it's not just cloud, but it's really a holistic, we call it sort of a hybrid approach to what we call sort of the industrialization of cloud and microservices and the next generation of security.
Dan, jump in. I know you've got another perspective on it too.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking a lot this year. I mean, everyone's called 2021, certainly ransomware has been huge. And Mitch, I know you're going to talk a little bit more about supply chain. And I've also been thinking a lot about technical debt and how if you're going to accelerate your company, if you're going to be one of these, a leader in your industry, you got to figure out what sort of tech debt do you have? How is it holding you back? And then importantly, what sort of security holes is it opening up? So the Colonial Pipeline, it came down to an old VPN. Right now, Maryland Health is undergoing a ransomware attack, and I don't know much about Maryland's IT infrastructure, their state IT infrastructure. I can guarantee there's some pretty old stuff there and a ton of technical debt, and a lot of people who probably no longer live there, didn't properly document, and so they're trying to sort of figure out what levers to switch. So I'm seeing a need to address technical debt from a security perspective, but then also from a innovation perspective. If you're going to move forward, you gotta have that underpinning that allows you to accelerate.
Seems like that's some of the growing pain too, of you can't just flip the switch and say we're all digital now, unless you're greenfield. Even then, that may not be that easy. It's almost like, Judith, you were talking about, it's about software, but it's about a lot more. Maybe it's just software as a strategy is the new thinking, right? And all the things that come with it, that's a big driver or enabler of our business, is where that. And then you get down to the nitty gritty, what you're talking about, Dan, of, well, yeah, and by the way, you have that 20-year-old VPN sitting out there that hasn't been changed in 5 years or 10.
And then we think about things like microservices and containerization, which, okay, if we just do microservices everywhere, that takes care of the problem. Of course, the issue is that what are you putting in that microservice? How are you using it? What is the security of that specific service? And if you're not paying attention to that, you can, all you need is a couple of microservices that are buggy, that cause all sorts of security holes. And you're not just using that service once, you're using it across your business partners and your internal folks and your customers, and you can create a real mess. And I think that in 2022, we're going to see some of these issues really become a major source of problems for companies.
Good point. Microservices is certainly one significant factor. I think another two is just API built applications designed around APIs rather than it being sort of the hard outer shell of the application. So we really transformed the software architectures. And that brings with it observability as a challenge and the emergence of that in this year, which of course I think will carry forward into next year to 2022, as well as the security around it. What about, how about low code, no code? That was is going forward a huge thing. We heard a lot about it, even whether it's a citizen developer or, it's a tool for IT too. It's not just for the citizen developer.
Yeah. So while I think, low code makes a lot of sense, and there are a lot of vendors that are offering that, and businesses are getting value. I think that one of the big issues that we have to pay attention to is you can't just say, go ahead, this is easy to use code, build whatever you want, because it's not that simple. You need guardrails, you need best practices, you need to build that into a low code environment. Otherwise, somebody will start to build something because they don't know any better. What you need is really an environment that where you start to do something and you get that red stop right where you are. You cannot continue this way because you've just created something that either can't scale or is risky from a security standpoint, or you've created something that just is going to break your data access, all sorts of things that I don't know if people have been paying attention to, but I believe it's going to become more of an issue. The same way we were talking about, the citizen data scientists a couple of years ago. We're gonna run into some issues.
Yeah, and then also there's a lot. Someone's got to manage all these applications. So IT needs to be in the loop. So I think low code, no code is really promising if the IT organization and the business are collaborating. They're setting up those guardrails together, and they both understand what the other's doing. Mitch, you wear a few hats with Techstrong and Techstrong Research. So as a CTO, I'm sure you've been frustrated a couple of times where a group might say, here's a great app and we're going to buy it. And you're probably thinking, we already have 3 of these apps. We don't need another one. So that's another area with low code, no code, where you have different businesses creating overlapping apps that do the same thing. And IT has a well-curated app ready to solve that challenge.
Yeah, I think it's sort of getting rid of the shadow IT fear. People are going to do this, right? It's just adopt the reality of it. And the thing I always go back to remembers is 3 reasons every app or service that somebody wants to use is going to come to IT. Access control, identity management, right? I need single sign-on to my app so I can roll it out to more people. Data and access to other applications. So it's kind of like you need to let the children free, let them learn, how to live their lives, and they'll come back, wiser, smarter, and I think you're a little wiser, smarter too. Hopefully that happens with IT. We'll see.
So I think you bring up a really important point. I think that for the last, 5 years, we've seen sort of the idea that developers know more than IT does. So let's let the developers buy whatever they want. Let's let the business unit has found a packaged application or a cloud-based SaaS application, and their buddies are using it, so it must be the right thing, only to discover that there are issues, and IT knew all along that oh my God, this is going to cause us problems, and it does. So I think you're going to see a move towards more centralization, at least of frameworks and environments that let you plug in things that people are going to buy anyway, but have more control.
Yeah, and jumping on what Judith mentioned before about citizen developers and no-code, low-code being similar to citizen data scientists. We saw the same thing a few years ago. Tons of vendors were pitching, you're going to have business users who are doing advanced analytics, machine learning, they're going to be on the bleeding edge of AI. And they went back to their data science teams because they weren't really sure exactly, you could get some interesting insights, but at the end of the day, the data scientists and the data science teams really knew the data. It was a partnering opportunity. So some of those citizen data scientists couldn't bring it over the finish line, but they were a little bit more informed when they were talking to the data team and saying, can we do this? Is it possible through data to do X, Y, and Z? So then they were sort of coming to the data science team with a business challenge, and then the data science team understood what their constituents needed, what the business problem was. So sort of a rallying call or an opportunity to work together. And I see that no-code, low-code is very similar.
I think that's the key point, working together. I don't think you're going to put become your own IT back, that cat back into the bag, right? But it's
also
more about
working. Yeah, these low-code, the idea of the business user having all this time in the world to create every app they need, they have work to do also. They're not evaluated on creating a ton of apps.
So let's switch to, you mentioned earlier, Judith, about supply chain, right? Before SolarWinds, we didn't talk about supply chain. It's not brand new. It's not a new concept, but in terms of software, it is. We wrap up 2021 with Log4j, right? Vulnerability in open source, which is part of that big part of the supply chain for products, for apps, IT organizations alike. Why do you think that's become the issue? Why is supply chain all over the map in terms of what we're talking about?
I think it's because no application is an island. Applications talk to each other. They exchange data. They create new business processes, and I think that's one of the things that's been sort of focus has been appreciated in 2021 is business process transformation. So it's fine to have low code, no code in all of these different apps, but if you're not looking at how things interact with each other to create, a solution for the business, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And I think that one of the things that will separate out really smart companies is that they understand how to use their software assets, their software supply chain to easily and quickly transform business processes when their business changes. Then companies who can't are going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and I think it's also even following up. I mean, Judith was a co-author in service-oriented architecture, not quite a million years ago, but
almost
over a decade ago.
But who's counting? We're amongst friends.
Yeah. So the applications, as Judith was saying, are interconnected. They're made up of a lot of different parts. So the way I look at applications these days is, developers are assembling complex applications. They're writing new code, but they're also using code that other people have developed. They're using open source. They're assembling these big applications. And so understanding what's going into that big application, because at the end of the day, sometimes applications are still big and monolithic, even though they're made up of a lot of different parts. Who's tracking all these different parts that they're made up of? who's updating the applications. And so this is why the supply chain is so important from a DevOps standpoint. Is you've got to figure out, all right, I've got an application stack that's made up of, a half dozen different open source technologies. Is anyone still working in that community to provide updates? And you need to track all of this. You can't just sort of set it and forget it.
It brings up the whole software bill of materials, right? Starting
Right.
with what you have, and if you have to do that by hand, that's a.
And then you add in app modernization, where so many companies have aging applications that they don't know what the business process is, they don't know what the rules are, can't understand the data, and everyone wants to modernize their application environment, but it takes a lot more work to really understand, the cause and effect of things and how things work together and what it really means when A talks to B, talks to C.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Mitch recently published a provocative blog on, do we have too much open source? Is that the big problem with Log4j and the mess with the software supply chain? So I'll let Mitch answer that on, do we have too much open source?
Oh, that's my clickbait title. So no, we don't have too much open source. It just points out the systemic nature of complexity of the software environment you all just talked about, which kind of goes to one other point I think we wanted to call out about 2021 is the move from artisan software. The developer is king, and yes, developers may be king or queen or whatever, but they're part of a kingdom too. There's a systemic environment that all this happens in, and we are moving that into more of a science engineering based, process oriented, automated, with DevOps for thinking about how we create and deliver software, workflows, tool chains, and all the different software architectures fit into that. It seems like that is maybe with the elevation of software, it's also become, okay, well, how do we create it and how complex it is? How do we manage it?
Yeah, it's a huge issue because if we think about some of the movements in this past year, we were just talking about the citizen developer, and it may be that while that's a trend, and we talked about guardrails, but you need to provide enough componentry that is well architected and well designed so that things, it's the Lego model versus forming things that are artistically beautiful, but actually don't work together in the real world.
Well, let's look a little bit at 2022. I don't know if we're putting our full crystal ball in front of us to make some hard predictions, but I know one of the things we've talked a lot about is around API security currently is a hot topic. I would suggest it's going to become even bigger, is becoming bigger leading into 2022. And maybe, Judith, that speaks to some of the things you were mentioning around microservices and API-based designed applications, right?
Yeah. So APIs and API management has been around for probably the last 10 years. But I think with the growth in different ways of application modernization, containerization, microservices, it's really changing the very nature of APIs and making, the earliest APIs were remote procedure calls where somebody would write a piece of custom code to connect A to B to C, and APIs they're much more standardized, and we're moving to APIs that are much more uniform. So having a consistent, predictable way and an open source way to think about API security and API management is going to be one of the key trends of 2022. I also think that in 2022 we're also going to be looking at issues around what does it mean to really engineer software, and what does that really mean? What does that look like? And how do we begin to verticalize that? So I think the solution clouds, we haven't discussed clouds that much, but that's one of the big trends that I think we saw towards the end of 2021 is the idea of what we're calling the industrialization of the cloud, where clouds aren't just a bunch of random services that, if I need to build something fast, I'll use a cloud. But in fact, it is the way we do business in vertical markets. And I think one of the early indications of a massive change in this is Oracle proposed purchase of Cerner, which is obviously a healthcare-based environment. And, from my experience of doing, consulting in the life sciences software market, it's a really, really hard, complex, very business process oriented, with a lot of people that in the scientists who believe that they are much smarter than anyone who does software, and that remains an issue to this day. And it's one of these money pits, I also think, where it's just software, what's the big deal? Well, this is a deep, dark, difficult environment with lots of very complex, ugly data that has to be integrated and managed. And you're going to see all sorts of companies jumping on the bandwagon, buying their own software environments for this market.
Yeah, you wonder, I'm going to go back in history a bit of ways, but is this Larry Ellison's Ross Perot moment of going into the financial services industry? Or is this enough muscle, enough, big enough ownership of part of the market to actually make some movement to not only own a lot of it, but start to even getting more technology from Oracle and others into the healthcare market? I don't know, Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on it. It's a big bet by Oracle, but I'm pretty bullish on it. I mean, EHR systems are very sticky. So if you think about what makes Google's cloud really sticky is the whole Google Docs and Gmail environment. Microsoft's always had Office. So this Cerner's EHR platform, really sticky. They've got the apps. They've got they have a ton of data. They're acquiring a lot of, I think it's over 24,000 employees. So if Oracle can build a bit of an ecosystem around this, where they say, we've got the Oracle Health Cloud, it's Cerner's on it, and come one, come all if you want to be a partner and a player in the healthcare market. I think they can build a pretty big ecosystem. They also have to be careful of innovators. I mean, Oracle bought PeopleSoft for, I don't remember off the top of my head, but bought PeopleSoft and look what happened. Who thinks about PeopleSoft anymore? So different cloud vendors came on, born on the web vendors, and PeopleSoft is an afterthought. So they do have to be careful that although Cerner has a huge footprint today, if they don't innovate, it's not going to be forever. And even though healthcare has been slow to move to the cloud, they're moving to the cloud like everyone else. And
don't forget that a number of years ago, Oracle bought a lot of clinical trial software companies, and that they didn't take over that market. And that market, it seemed like it was going to be a huge market, and it obviously is a big market, but I don't know if it had the rewards that they expected.
And it's an entrenched market, and yes, maybe Cerner is that entrenchment, that beachhead
Well, or is the Oracle acquisition a reason to sort of rethink your relationship with Cerner? So that's sort of what's, what are they going to change and what will they keep the same?
Well, and doing that might be tough, but yeah, you have a good point. So one other thought we wanted to maybe wrap up on is talking about security. We mentioned API security earlier. There's a lot of movement of thinking security more systemically, zero trust model. The SASE, secure edge architecture. Thinking about an API security, we're thinking about the application security. It's not boxes and speeds and feeds and kind of normal, how do we build walls to keep people out of things? More of how does the whole thing going to be secure? And it's a moving target too. That's the other thing is we're adding more services, more microservices, not less. So it seems to me that, well, maybe we're at the beginning of this transition, Dan, but this is a move to think of security more holistically. Would you agree with that at all?
Yeah, I think so. And it's sort of security at every level of the stack. I mean, zero trust, the financial services industry has been talking about it for a year plus, and there isn't a security conversation they have or a technology conversation they have that doesn't talk about zero trust, especially with the cloud. Sometimes we've talked to a number of, or at least one CIO that said, one vendor doesn't talk about zero trust. They're so big, we're willing to overlook it. But every other vendor, zero trust needs to be a center point of their approach to security. Another thing I'm tracking in the cloud, it's cloud security, but it's also application robustness. So this idea that you can't control the infrastructure, so you really need to be totally focused on your application and the data. So that's from a security standpoint, and that's also from, what are you going to do on a failover disaster recovery situation? And it's not just, multiple regions, but you have to do a number of tabletop exercises and really understand how you've architected your applications and where your data is and what are you going to do if there's a failure.
Seems like this is the pendulum swinging, Judith, from we got to control everything, block everything, lock it down, to we need something that's adaptable because this thing is not staying in place, that we've got to secure.
Yeah. The one thing we always know is that everything changes.
Yeah, nothing more constant than change, right?
Right.
Well, there's been a lot of fun kind of thinking about sort of what's coming out of 2021 and lead us into 2022. I'm sure we'll have some more ideas as we get into the year, but
yes.
Thanks to you both. Good. Thanks for our little rotating leadership that we have on these sessions, and enjoy doing these with you. And we appreciate everybody joining us.
We look forward to engaging with you all in 2022. It should be a very interesting year.
Please do. And please go to techstrongresearch.com. Got a lot of great free content, some of our research, some blog posts, some really interesting data. And there's, as Judith mentioned, more to come. Have a great 2022.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, rounding out today's Techstrong TV broadcast, we have The View with Vizard, in which Mike Vizard speaks with Craig McLucky, who's the chairman of the Cloud Foundry Foundation. They talk about the convergence of Kubernetes and platform as a service environments and how that is going to drive application development moving forward. It's a great conversation as always, lots of takeaways. Let's go ahead and get to it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Craig McLuckie, who's the newly installed chairman for the Cloud Foundry Foundation. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be on.
I can remember back in the day when everybody was worried that, Cloud Foundry wouldn't be able to keep up with Kubernetes and they would bypass them and they'd be irrelevant, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure you've heard the whole discussion. Flash forward 3 or 4 years later, and we're still in the early days of Kubernetes, and Cloud Foundry's caught up. The foundation is now using Kubernetes as the base for much of their work going forward on the Cloud Foundry PaaS itself. What's your sense of where are we in the adoption of Kubernetes? And maybe it didn't move quite as fast as everybody thought it would.
I would say Kubernetes, the technology cycle for technology, when you look at the kind of adoption cycle for technology like Kubernetes, I think it's always a lot longer than people anticipate. And it tends to follow a series of waves. I remember the very earliest days of Kubernetes, there were a lot of these very progressive West Coast technology companies that were adopting the technology, sometimes even before I was would really have recommended that they start using it. And then we started to see the sort of flow through of the technology as it started to become a mainstay for a lot of organizations. And I'd say from an adoption perspective, Kubernetes is certainly becoming more intrinsically mainstream. But I think the thing that people miss is that there's this false dichotomy. A lot of folks talk about Cloud Foundry versus Kubernetes. And one of the things that's really important to recognize is that Kubernetes is just a small part of the story. Kubernetes does provide some really powerful capabilities. It gives you this abstraction that hides away the specifics of the infrastructure, but it's still just an abstraction. And one of the things that I think has certainly made me feel really excited about participating in the Cloud Foundry ecosystem and starting to see the emergence of new technologies that are bringing that more platform as a service experience to this abstraction is just unlocking a lot of value for the world. So I'd say, yes, Kubernetes is emerging as a mainstream technology. Yes, it is still too complex to consume for a lot of folks that don't necessarily want to spend their evenings and weekends geeking out on infrastructure technology. But the great news is that we are starting to see the maturation of technologies that just make it more intrinsically accessible, of which Cloud Foundry is a great example.
Do you think the relationship is somewhat symbiotic? Because on the one hand, people will say Kubernetes is the most powerful yet complex thing they've seen in a long time, and a PaaS makes it more accessible. Conversely, people used to say that Cloud Foundry was too large for anybody to consume other than a cloud service provider. So the only way you could really get at it was as a service. And yet now it seems like Kubernetes makes it a little more lighter weight and more accessible to a broader number of people. So, is there kind of a 2 + 2 = 10 kind of equation happening here?
I absolutely think so. And I think this has been a repeating pattern that I've seen, historically over time. What we see is, platform as a service capabilities. And I don't really care, pick your poison. There's a lot of different, platform as a service technologies that have existed, but they've generally been relatively monolithic, sort of fully vertically integrated, a closed system, really powerful to accomplish, a certain set of tasks. But when you reach the boundary of that system, things get really hard. And one of two things happen. Either people start to try to jam things into the PaaS environment that really shouldn't be there, or they decide that they can't do what they want to accomplish, and so they abandon it. And what we're doing now with technologies like, Cloud Foundry, and, we're actually seeing a lot of choices starting to emerge around what I think of as sort of domain-specific platform capabilities, or sort of more modular PaaS capabilities, is just creating the optionality so that historically, your options were PaaS or a virtual machine, and there was almost nothing in between. Kubernetes kind of split the difference, so you now have a sort of step down as you're going lower and lower in the stack, and you want to access more direct specifics of the environment. And I do think there's synergies there. I think what we're doing in the Cloud Foundry ecosystem by introducing that CF push experience into the Kubernetes environment is creating something very powerful that's really relevant to organizations today, which is effectively generating a closure around the technologies that you're using, creating the guardrails that you need to be able to deliver a production outcome, creating that abstraction that makes it really accessible and easy for developers to use. but holding open the options to be able to run other things side by side with it that are more naturally integrated into the Kubernetes type of ecosystem, or potentially providing different PaaS options for different teams that might have different sets of requirements. So it's just nice to have that optionality. It's nice to have this additional tool in the tool chest. And there's a lot of benefits when you start looking at Cloud Foundry as an accretive technology. But also don't want to abandon the original utility of a technology like Cloud Foundry. Kubernetes is a great technology. Like, no one loves it more than I do. Trust me, I've been talking about it since its inception. But there are some things that it's not particularly great at. And when you start looking at things like running traditional Windows workloads, maybe there's other ways to do it. And actually, Cloud Foundry has a very mature stack for running Windows-based workloads, because it's really offering an application level abstraction, which tends to work well in the Windows ecosystem. So I think the future of these technologies is really around optionality, picking the right tool for the job. Let's not get into the habit of banging screws in with the hammer. If you want to put a screw into something, here's a screwdriver. If you want to frame a house, here's a hammer and some framing nails. And just having that optionality is I think going to stand everyone in good stead.
When we tried to split the difference between VMs and a PaaS, and we were throwing around terms like container as a service platforms, CASs, and whatever, I can't help but wonder if maybe all these terms that we have been using are something of a disservice at this point, and maybe we just need to call things development platforms and not confuse people so much.
Yeah, I think the reality is that we are seeing change. We are seeing the emergence of new capabilities. And frankly, the world that enterprises are dealing with it's never been more complex. We see every enterprise organization out there trying to reason about, like, what is our multi-cloud strategy? I don't necessarily want to be in a single provider relationship with a single cloud provider. So how do I make that work? How do I create efficiencies for myself if I'm deploying applications? Edge becomes an incredibly important part of the story. Folks are starting to see, fragmentation of their deployment fleet because, every policy is introducing new privacy constraints. So the enterprise world is definitely getting more complex, and we are seeing the emergence of new, almost categories of capabilities that are starting to evolve. And I think we do ourselves a disservice by just pigeonholing a technology. Oh, that's a PaaS technology, I'm not interested in PaaS. Or, oh, Kubernetes is just an infrastructure abstraction. I'm not an infrastructure individual, so why would I care about it? And I do see these new types of capabilities starting to emerge. Maybe they don't have the right words associated with them yet, but you're right. Most developers care about writing software. They want to take business logic and encapsulate it in code and use that to generate delight for their customers. And what technologies they use are not as important as how quickly and effectively are they able to construct that experience. How do they construct that experience in a way that future-proofs them from security exploitation or being locked into a specific environment? And I think technologies like Kubernetes or Cloud Foundry and a lot of the other new emerging areas of innovation in the open source community are just providing deeper levels of optionality. And I do agree with you. I think pigeonholing a technology to a category which was really ideated in a simpler world isn't necessarily doing anyone any favors.
Speaking of terms we hear a lot about these days, we hear about microservices and cloud native, and yet we have all these monolithic applications that people still continue to build. I think maybe it's kind of going back to your tools analogy, but are we going to be building microservices-based applications alongside monolithic applications for a long time to come? And sometimes we might convert monolithic into microservices, and hey, we may even go back the other way, right? So are we going to see this kind of mix and match mentality going forward?
I think so. And it's really interesting because I think if anyone tells you there's one way to do something and only one way, they're probably selling something, right? Like, the reality is the duty cycle of technologies is fantastically durable. And for most enterprise organizations, it's really a cost-benefit equation. Like, I have an application, I've invested in it. Like, I hate the word legacy because, like, you have to have some respect. That's the application that's running the world. That's the application that's driving your business. So I always like to say heritage instead of legacy. And when I look at this, it really does come back to the having the right tool for the right job, and also the right tool for the right person who's trying to accomplish the job. One of the things I always used to talk about with with my team was, like I'm a dad, right? So I have kids, and when my kids were young, we'd do projects together. But I would, when they were 3 or 4 years old, I'd put a blunt screwdriver and a little pair of pliers and a little tiny hammer in their toolbox, and I would let them, work with it. And now my kids are now 16 and 18. I'm fine with them using power tools because, as long as I watch them and make sure they're not doing anything problematic. I think it's really about looking at what a team is trying to accomplish and giving them the tools that are natural to them to accomplish that task, not overwhelming them with this deluge of capabilities, but really being able to say, hey, for this task, here's a set of tools. We know they work really well. We know they're going to solve your problem. Go ahead and use them. But forcing a team to pursue one specific architecture, one specific set of patterns leads to some really perverse effects. I'll give you an example. I remember having a conversation with an individual that had taken a monolithic application and broken it down into 27 microservices. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. So you're all into microservices. And they were like, yep, we're very modern, very cloud native, very progressive. And I asked the question, well, when you want to update one of those microservices, how many do you have to update? And they're like, oh, we have to update all 27 concurrently. So I was like, well, what you've constructed is not really microservice-based architecture. You've constructed a microlith. It's like a monolith, except it's worse because you've taken a vertical scaling problem and turned it into this incredibly complex orchestration problem as you have to change these things. So it's really about making sure that the teams have the capabilities to solve the problems that they're facing, that they're using tools that feel familiar to them, but in a way that's leading them to produce more intrinsically scalable, more intrinsically sustainable, more intrinsically flexible architectures that stand the test of time. So I don't think this is about going and rewriting every monolithic application. I don't think this is about saying, hey, everyone should be writing Lambdas and using sort of serverless technologies. I think it's really just about use the right tool for the right job at the right time. Make sure that your teams are presented a set of logical capabilities that lead to success, rather than overwhelming them with a set of tools that potentially lead to suboptimal potential outcomes over time.
You, of course, were at Kubernetes at the beginning, and part of the original concept was we were going to have a platform for building platforms. So is that where we are now? We have these higher level abstractions that sit on top of Kubernetes, but maybe we all don't need to be so deep into the core of the cluster itself.
Very much so. I think that vision has very much come to fruition, and I think folks that lose sight of that sometimes get themselves into trouble. There's one of the things I always kind of apologize for is your first experience with Kubernetes is this wall of YAML. We never really intended people to interact as much with the YAML as they do. We always thought that the right set of abstractions would emerge on top of it and would allow people to interact with things that were far more naturally human consumable. And we are at a point now where we're starting to see those platforms emerging on Kubernetes platform. Cloud Foundry is a great example with the transition to using that underlying orchestration technology that Kubernetes is really good for and complementing it with that really simple experience for going from an IDE to a running piece of code. We've created something quite special. And I think we'll continue to see that. There's not going to be one size fits all. I think as organizations look at their needs, as they're starting to deal with some of the challenges associated with how do I secure my software supply chain? How do I make sure that my engineers aren't picking up something that was potentially exploited somewhere down the line? And how do I create that determinism? How do I get that transitive closure around all the dependencies that I'm using? These things will come together very naturally.
It almost feels like the tail is now wagging the dog. Initially, there was a bunch of developers that drove adoption of Kubernetes, and then I think it crossed over to the DevOps team and the IT operations team that likes the idea of being able to scale up and down infrastructure resources. And a lot of developers are still somewhat intimidated by Kubernetes itself. So are we kind of trying to get back to the middle? Will the pendulum land in the middle now between one extreme of developers driving and then IT ops driving, and now we're all kind of on the cusp of maybe some agreement to move forward together?
I would say so. And I think there's it's really fascinating to see the kind of evolution of, not just how we build applications, but how we operate them. And it's, the way I tend to think about this is, first there was the epoch of the system administrator. So it's almost like the Swiss watchmaker, where they piece together a server based on the very specifics of an organization. Then you have release engineers that they interact with that provide them the binaries, and then they craft it just so, and then they put it out into the wild. And then we moved from that sort of classic sort of sysops system administrator view into this DevOps view, where the sort of thesis was, well, my engineers know how to code. I have all of these new capabilities available at the other end of an API call. Why don't I just have my developers code themselves into production? And life is suddenly going to be good. But you discover that, you're introducing a lot of complexity, and you're like introducing a lot of cognitive load, because engineers now have to think about, well, how do I design the system? And then how do I layer in observability? And how do I reason about application performance management? And, how do I set up all of my continuous integration and delivery, sort of frameworks? There's a lot of cognitive load that's sort of emerging there. So I do think the opportunity that we are moving into is really grounded in, embracing some of the sort of SRE ideals, site reliability engineering ideals. We have some levels of specialization. We have teams that are already delivering services out to those adjacent teams, or teams are just consuming SaaS-based software, where it's available to solve their problems. But the thing that I find fascinating about what we're moving towards, as an industry, is this emergence of almost intent-driven operations. Getting to a point where you can provide an expression of intent. Hey, I want this thing to run with this many nines. Make it so. And then replacing a lot of that code that DevOps engineers had to write with these intelligent subsystems that are able to materialize that intent into that environment. And we're starting to really see the emergence of things like, instead of building platform-aware applications, we now have the opportunity to build application-aware platforms. And that transition towards intent-driven, systems is really going to make life a whole lot easier for a lot of people. And Kubernetes is just a part of that. But getting to the point where you have that formal definition of what constitutes an application, a lot of those ideas that were really ideated in the Cloud Foundry ecosystem starting to emerge and create those higher levels of abstraction is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. So what's your best advice to folks at this point? It feels like they probably have a couple of teams that have moved forward Kubernetes. They certainly have a lot of virtual machines and VMware and all those other platforms. They have a few PaaS probably floating around as well. How do I bring all this together in something that feels cohesive?
I think, my one piece of advice here is I don't think forced convergence necessarily benefits anyone. I've seen a lot of situations where an organization falls in love with the technology, and I don't care what the technology is. It could be Cloud Foundry, it could be Kubernetes. Pick any hot new technology, and they force people to start using it, and it creates perverse effects. It forces people to move outside of the comfort zone. Sometimes slows them down. It creates situations where things that oughtn't to fit in that environment are now being driven into that environment by policy rather than by pragmatic consideration. So I think the best advice I can give is to have individuals kind of look at their portfolio and really take the time to assess, what's driving the cost, complexity, and risk for me. Like when I look at my application portfolio, is this piece of the portfolio driving significant cost and complexity? Or is it something that I can sustain in a pragmatic way? But also recognize that equation will change over time as your team becomes more fluent with technologies like Kubernetes, as the tooling around it starts to emerge, as things like Cloud Foundry become available to deliver those outcomes in Kubernetes. The value equation changes, the maturity of your team will change, things will change over time. So I think it's worth investing in some of these technologies. There's a reason why folks fall in love with Kubernetes or folks fall in love with the Cloud Foundry. Take the time to understand that. But also just look at your team and really assess, what is the intersection of skills and need? What is driving my cost of operations? How do I make smart investments, not only in modernizing my portfolio, but modernizing my development techniques, modernizing the way that I'm delivering software? Just walk slowly. There's no single silver bullet here. There's nothing that's going to make the pain of IT just go away. That's just not how the world works. But you can start to deliver options that have much more accessibility for developers that they're naturally drawn towards. Instead of forcing them to use something, just offer them that option and make it easy for them to use it. You'll be surprised how quickly they'll start to adopt it. and look at the technologies, not just in terms of what the cost to produce a new application outcome is, but also what does it take to sustain this? What does it take to maintain this? How do I make those smart investments now that are going to make future me's life a little bit easier because I've built something on a sustainable platform that doesn't have consistent high levels of ongoing operating costs associated with it.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. Application development is kind of like water. Will find its own level eventually. Craig, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's been a great pleasure.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, that's it for another Techstrong TV broadcast. Hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I did. We are going to be back tomorrow with a brand new one. But before we go, I do want to quickly remind you we have a great virtual event coming up January 19th and 20th. It is our annual Predict event, and it is what it says it is. It is a virtual event dedicated to the predictions for IT, security, DevOps, cloud native, so much more. But it's a 2-day event, 2 half days, and it is chock full of some really amazing speakers and topics. We've got one of our keynotes is being done by Emmett Keefe and Thomas Crane from Insight Partners. They're going to talk about the new wave of technologies, and Alan Schimmel is going to be moderating that discussion. Definitely a must-see for anybody. I mean, if you are interested in what's coming down the pike, this is definitely a keynote to watch. We've also got some presentations from Carrie Perlson, who's from MIT, Russ Finney from the University of Texas at Austin McCombs School of Business, Matthew Gorani from Forrester, as well as Tracy Bannon from MITRE and Chris Hughes from Acquia on so many different topics throughout the 2-day event. Really a lot of great or presentations that are going to be happening over the course of the 2 days. I don't think I can stress enough how good the quality of the conversations are during the Predict conference in general, and this year is going to be no different. So I do encourage you to check it out. Just go to techstrongevents.com and you can find the Predict site there. You can check out the agenda, you can check out the lineup of speakers, and you can register, and I guarantee you there will be something for everyone at this event. So highly encourage you to check it out. Meanwhile, I'll be back tomorrow with a brand new Techstrong TV broadcast with lots of great conversations, as always. Until then, I bid you adieu. I will see you tomorrow, and I hope everybody has a great day. And please, whatever you do, stay safe.